Chapter 1741. Could it be that Yi Xian had already stepped into the Forbidden Realm? A shocking thought appeared in Yi Xian's mind, but he quickly dispelled this absurd thought. This was because Yi Xian didn't have the light of death that was unique to taboo characters, so he definitely hadn't stepped into the taboo realm yet. However, Yi Xian could not understand. The Forbidden Realm was above the strongest of all ages. However, the strongest were obviously no match for Yi Xian. So, what was Yi Xian's cultivation level at this moment? Not to mention Yi Xian's lack of understanding. Even the two disciples fighting Yi Xian were overwhelmed with shock. The two disciples had always known that Yi Xian was terrifyingly strong. He had even killed a strongest in the past. However, according to their calculations, Yi Xian would definitely not be a match for them if they joined forces. However, it seemed that this was not the case at all. They were obviously at a disadvantage. This could be seen from the exchange of blows just now. Above the dome in the void, Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. He looked at the two disciples calmly. His eyes were as deep as an ancient pond, without any ripples. Your cultivation level was given to you by me. However, you actually used it to go against me. Today, I will teach you how to use the force of life and the force of karma. Rumble. As Yi Xian finished speaking, he formed a seal with both hands. Mysterious lines spread from his fingertips. The world suddenly turned illusory. Mysterious ripples spread in the sky, accompanied by a terrifying power. Eternal Dream. At this moment, Yi Xian used the Eternal Dream. Of course, the Eternal Dream that Yi Xian used was not the art of entering dreams. Instead, it was the opportunity of reincarnation that he had experienced in the Eternal Dream. Wind rise. Woo woo woo. Chaotic gales howled in the sky. Rainfall. Whoosh whoosh, it was raining heavily. The sky was like a curtain. Thunder descend. Crack. Billions of lightning snakes shook the sky. Life begins and ends. Everything comes from death to life. End. Rumble. The next moment, something extremely terrifying happened. Yi Xian's body burst with the life force of the Tongtian. With a wave of his hand, the world darkened. When he raised his hand, all things sprouted. The life force that filled the world turned into a rolling river. Following Yi Xian's attack, it directly suppressed Yi Fengtian. How is this possible? Such a scene made Yi Xuanma exclaim in shock. He could not believe his eyes. Everyone knew that Yi Fengtian had comprehended the great Tao of life. His life energy could shake the heavens, and he had even become a Tao enlightened one. But what did Yi Xian see now? Yi Xian was actually using his life force, and it was even more terrifying than Yi Fengtian's. This was simply a fantasy, and it was even more terrifying than Yi Fengtian's life force. Yi Xian wasn't the only one who was dumbfounded. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Even Yi Fengtian himself was dumbfounded. He couldn't believe what was happening. Rumble. The surging river of life force was like a silver river that hung upside down from the 9 heavens as it swept towards Yi Fengtian. This also caused Yi Fengtian to wake up in shock. He could only brace himself to receive Yi Xian's attack. Sky Seal. Rumble. Yi Fengtian drew a circle with his palms. He pushed his cultivation to the extreme and rushed toward Yi Xian's attack. Bang! Barf! A mouthful of blood spurted out from Yi Fengtian's mouth. He couldn't resist Yi Xian's attack at all. His entire body was blown away by this attack. Even his body cracked like a spider web. Sky Seal! Wan Hongling exclaimed. She waved her hand and gathered the supreme power of karma. She attacked Yi Xian. I'm the one who taught you the way of karma. How dare you show off in front of me? Yi Xian coldly said. He raised 2 of his fingers into the sky, causing the wind and rain in this area to instantly dissipate. The red lines that filled the sky rose up in a terrifying manner. The mysterious karma energy was born at the tip of his finger, and with a single finger, he suppressed Wan Hongling. Rumble. Tongtian pierced the ground, and everything fell silent. This finger was known as the finger of karma. This finger could crush everything. It could even destroy the world. Boom. The power of karma that Wan Hongling unleashed shattered. The finger of karma pressed down on her body and sent her flying. Blood flowed out of her body. What was the Eternal Dream? It was mentioned before that the Eternal Dream was the most dangerous forbidden technique that Yi Xian had obtained. Although it was not as powerful as the forbidden heavenly technique, it was still much more terrifying than other forbidden techniques. Yi Xian had been immersed in the eternal dream for more than 700 million years. He had even crossed to Yuanhui. The things that he had experienced were unimaginable to outsiders. The most terrifying thing about the eternal dream was that it could turn any method and Tao that Yi Xian had seen into his own. He could even turn into anyone he had seen. In the eternal dream, Yi Xian had turned into too many people. Some were his friends, some were his enemies, and of course some were his disciples. Another thing that was even more terrifying was that Yi Xian had turned into a forbidden character in the eternal dream. He had even deduced their methods and Tao. This was also why, although Yi Xian was not as powerful as a forbidden character, he was confident that he would be invincible against a forbidden character. Let's put it this way. Not to mention the life force that Yi Xian had comprehended, he could even use the so-called chaos force and destiny force of the three most powerful forces in the primal chaos. After all, Yi Xian was the only one who knew how terrifying the eternal dream was. Otherwise, he would not have been trapped in the eternal dream and almost never be able to wake up again. As the saying went, fortune and misfortune came hand in hand. Although the eternal dream was extremely dangerous, the benefits were also unimaginable. Boom, boom, boom. It was as if the heavens were pressing down, as if the vast universe was trembling. Yi Xian walked step by step towards his two disciples. The 12 heavenly gates behind him existed for eternity, and the might they released shook the entire primal chaos. Master, kill these two unfilial disciples. Boom. Yi Xian was a little too smart. When he sensed Yi Xian's invincible and terrifying cultivation base, he instantly appeared in front of Yi Xian and released his extreme demonic power. He wanted to help Yi Xian suppress his two disciples on the spot. This was a great flattery. Back off, Yi Xian said coldly. Yi Xian's face trembled. He hurriedly withdrew his extreme demonic power and then retreated from the battlefield. He knew that Yi Xian did not want him to participate. Fengtian Hongling, you should know my temperament. Anyone who goes against me must die. Rumble. Like the heavens and earth, he was invincible. At this moment, Yi Xian was too terrifying. The 12 gates of eternity suppressed the world, and the eternal dream swept across the heavens. Moreover, his secret arts were earth-shattering. How could the so-called strongest be in his eyes? Master, if you don't have the heart to do it, as their senior brother, I am willing to end them for you, Yi Xian said cruelly. There was even a hint of gloating in his eyes. At this moment, Yi Fengtian and Wan Hongling supported each other. Their faces were pale, and there were traces of blood at the corner of their mouths. Yi Xian's attack just now had caused extremely serious injuries to them. Master is master. Even if I have become a strongest, in terms of cultivation base, there is still an insurmountable gap between me and you. Yi Fengtian said bitterly. Master, please turn back. Don't force Fengtian anymore. Even if your cultivation base has surpassed the strongest, you are still no match for Fengtian. Wan Hongling bit her lips and said. Chapter 1742. It seems you still haven't given up, said Yi Xian indifferently. Master, we never wanted to be enemies with you. As long as you turn back now and return to the life shrine with me, I will still be filial to you, said Yi Fengtian bitterly. Turn back. Yi Xian sneered. Fengtian, so many years have passed. Although you've become a supreme expert, you still haven't truly grown up. A person's path has to be walked by himself. There's no turning back. Master, forgive me for being unfilial today. I can only suppress you. But don't worry. I will always be by your side and be filial to you, said Yi Fengtian. Yi Fengtian's expression was sorrowful. He slowly pushed Wan Hongling away, then knelt in the air and kowtowed towards Yi Xian, as if he'd already made a decision in his heart. A supreme expert of the present age? Seeing Yi Fengtian kowtowing, Yi Xian's eyes flickered. He had already guessed Yi Fengtian's plan. It was mentioned before that all supreme experts of the present age were supported by the will of the chaotic universe. Even the 3 supreme experts of the chaotic universe couldn't do anything to them. This was the reason why they could be called the ruler of a Yuan Hui. Yi Fengtian was a supreme expert of the present age and the master of the 11th Yuan Hui. He was supported by the will of the entire chaotic universe. This was where his true strength lay. Come, let me see how strong you are. Don't disappoint me, said Yi Xian indifferently. Master, I've been rude. Rumble. At this moment, Yi Fengtian slowly stood up. A mysterious and majestic aura bloomed from his body. The world within 100 million miles darkened. A mysterious and terrifying heavenly might came from the chaotic universe. Bang, bang, bang. The sky exploded, the void shattered, and the stars in the sky froze. The vast sea of stars poured down from the starry sky. Yi Fengtian was extremely majestic. At this moment, he was both Yi Fengtian and the will of the chaotic universe. He had truly become the master of the 11th Yuan Hui. He could be said to be an invincible existence of the chaotic universe. As expected, you've become much stronger. Yi Xian grinned and nodded approvingly. At that moment, Yi Fengtian made him feel threatened. That was enough to prove how terrifying cultivators were. Chaotic Divine Fist. Suddenly, Yi Fengtian threw his head back and roared. He slowly raised his fists, as if he was trying to lift up the entire chaos verse. The mysterious might of the chaos bloomed from his fists, causing the world to slowly explode. Rumble. Finally, Yi Fengtian threw a punch at Yi Xian. This punch caused the chaos to tremble. Heaven and earth mourn. This punch could split the heavens and earth. This punch could shatter anything. Interesting. Yi Xian was invigorated. Facing the primal chaos divine fist, his eyes opened and closed. Reincarnation reversed, and he raised his fists as well. The sky-burying reincarnation light fist radiance flashed terrifyingly. Eternal reincarnation fist. Rumble. Eternal samsara, chaos annihilation. There was nothing fancy about Yi Xian's punch. His fist could bury the heavens and destroy the earth. His fist reincarnated all things. This punch of his could break both the past and the present. Rumble. The master and disciple threw their fists at each other at the same time. The two dazzling fist radiance broke through the heavens and the earth, causing Yi Xuanma and Wan Hongling to retreat in horror. Bang! Finally, the master and disciple collided with each other, and the eruption of terrifying power filled the world for hundreds of millions of miles. Mountains and rivers shattered, and everything turned to ashes. Nothing could survive this attack. Even Yi Xuanma and Wan Hongling, who were hit by the aftershocks, were sent flying. This proved how terrifying the master and disciple's attack was. Not bad, you have indeed improved a lot. Suddenly, Yi Xian's indifferent voice was heard. In the exploded sky, Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. Yi Fengtian's face was solemn, and his eyes were trembling. Why did this happen? Yi Fengtian looked at his hands in confusion. He was so terrifying with the support of the will of the chaos verse. But why couldn't he suppress his master? He couldn't understand. Even if his master had surpassed the strongest, he was still a Tao enlightened one. Why couldn't he suppress his master? Yi Xian indifferently said as he gazed at Yi Fengtian's bewildered appearance. Come again. Let master see how much ability you have as a cultivator of this era. Rumble. Chaotic Divine Fist, Infinite Technique. Yi Fengtian once again unleashed the supreme power of a Tao enlightened one. He even borrowed the power of the chaos verse to support himself. He swung his arms again and attacked Yi Xian. Bang! 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 Heaven and earth shook, and everything fell silent. When Yi Fengtian attacked Yi Xian again, Yi Xian's expression didn't change. The 12 heavenly gates rotated behind him. No matter how many terrifying fist radiance this traitorous disciple threw, Yi Xian blocked them all. The so-called Tao enlightened one is nothing more than this. Yi Xian said coldly. He suddenly raised his 5 fingers, as if he was going to crush the entire starry sky. The terrifying sky burial reincarnation torrent wreaked havoc in the heavens and earth. Boom! Yi Xian's palm descended towards this traitorous disciple of his. Heaven and earth exploded for hundreds of millions of miles, and a supreme might that surpassed the might of the ancient times erupted. Bang! One hit. It was just a single blow. Yi Fengtian was sent flying. He spat out mouthfuls of blood. His flesh was exploding, and he no longer looked like a human. How can this be? When Wan Hongling and Yi Xian saw this scene, They gasped in shock. They couldn't believe their eyes. Although they knew that Yi Xian was very strong, Yi Fengtian was a Tao enlightened one. He also had the support of the will of the Chaos Verse, and could borrow the power of the Chaos Verse. How could he not be a match for Yi Xian? Crushed. It was a complete and utter suppression. He didn't even have a chance to resist, let alone fight Yi Xian. Boom. 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 The primal chaos trembled as Yi Xian walked step by step towards Yi Fengtian. When he arrived in front of Yi Fengtian, he looked down at him in a condescending manner. Fengtian, I used to think highly of you, but now you have disappointed me, Yi Xian said calmly. Master, I haven't lost yet. Yi Fengtian was bathed in blood. The power of life surrounded him. He struggled to get up from the void. Clearly, he didn't want to fall in front of Yi Xian. Bang! The 6 desires are emotionless, and the world is heartless. Without waiting for Yi Fengtian to get up, Yi Xian swung his palm and directly slapped Yi Fengtian's face, sending him flying and fiercely smashing into the ground. Boom! Yi Xian took a step forward and once again appeared in front of Yi Fengtian. Yi Fengtian fell to the ground like a pile of mud, and blood continuously flowed out from all over his body. His entire body was in a muddle-headed state. Even though he was a Tao enlightened one, he was still nothing in front of Yi Xian. This was because he wasn't on the same level as Yi Xian. Back in the day, the ancient shadow fought against the 10 most powerful beings alone. The 10 most powerful beings couldn't even raise their heads. The Lord of all spirits was a Tao enlightened one, but he couldn't resist at all. Chapter 1743. Even though Yi Xian wasn't a taboo realm cultivator, and his cultivation level was much lower than Yi Xian's, he wasn't a match for Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at Yi Fengtian, who was twitching on the ground like a dead dog. Blood kept flowing out of his mouth, and his life force was weakening. However, there was no pity in Yi Xian's eyes. Stand up, Yi Xian said calmly. When Yi Xian's voice sounded in Yi Fengtian's ears, Yi Fengtian's muddled eyes focused. He trembled as he supported himself with his arms, wanting to get up. However, his entire body was trembling violently, and his body was cracking inch by inch. His injuries were too severe. Even though he had cultivated an omnipotent body, he still suffered unimaginable damage under Yi Xian's attacks. Eternal reincarnation, destruction of chaos. This wasn't just a saying. It was an indescribable horror. It was said that omnipotent beings were immortal. However, under Yi Xian's reincarnation profound, even omnipotent beings couldn't do anything. Yi Fengtian roared. He finally got up with great willpower. He didn't want to be weak in front of Yi Xian. He wanted to show Yi Xian that he didn't do anything wrong. Bang! Yi Xian slapped Yi Fengtian once again, fiercely slapping him in the face, sending him flying once again. He directly smashed a human-shaped crater into the ground. Stand up. Yi Xian's voice rang out again. It was as emotionless as before. There was no pity in it at all. Wah! Yi Xian's slap was too heavy. It once again caused Yi Fengtian to spit out a mouthful of blood. The flesh all over his body exploded, revealing his bones. Master, I didn't do anything wrong. You're wrong. Yi Fengtian's right arm was broken. He used his left arm to support himself on the ground. He roared in grief and indignation. He was still trying to stand up. Finally, Yi Fengtian shakily stood up once more. But before he could stabilize himself, Yi Xian sent him flying with a backhand slap. Bang! Yi Fengtian smashed into the ground again. This time, he had completely fainted. Even the life force around him had completely dissipated. Dark red blood flowed out from under his body. If it weren't for the fact that Yi Fengtian was still breathing weakly, everyone would have thought that he was dead. Master, I was wrong. Please spare Fengtian's life. If you really want to kill me, then kill me. All of a sudden, Wan Hongling rushed over. With tears in her eyes, she held on to Yi Xian, who was seriously injured and unconscious. She turned around and pleaded with Yi Xian. Yi Xuanma arrived right after him. When he saw Yi Fengtian's miserable state, his heart turned cold, and he couldn't help but shiver. When he thought about how he had dared to attack Yi Xian, he felt a lingering fear. Boom! Yi Xian struck out with his palm, and sent Wan Hongling flying, causing her to spit out blood. Dong dong dong. Yi Xian walked towards Yi Fengtian step by step. With every step he took, the entire world trembled in fear, causing Wan Hongling to cry out in grief and plead for mercy. What a pity! Yi Xian turned a deaf ear to her pleas. His face was cold and emotionless. When he arrived in front of Yi Fengtian, he looked down at him and said in a cold and emotionless voice, "Stand up." However, this time, Yi Fengtian had completely fainted. He had no strength to stand up, and he couldn't hear what Yi Xian was saying to him. Boom! The next moment, something that made Yi Xuanma and Wan Hongling's hair stand on end happened. They were so scared that they were speechless. Crack! Yi Xian stomped on Yi Fengtian's knee with his right foot. With the sound of bones breaking, Yi Fengtian, who had fainted, cried out in pain. Ah! Under the pain of broken bones, Yi Fengtian woke up. Stand up! Yi Xian's voice was heard again. Master! Yi Fengtian cried out weakly. He tried his best to stand up, but his injuries were too serious. He was still in a daze. Ah! Crack! Suddenly, Yi Xian raised his foot and broke Yi Fengtian's other knee. The intense pain made Yi Fengtian cry out in pain. His dazed mind started to recover from the pain. Since you think I am wrong, then stand up and tell me, Yi Xian said indifferently. Ah! This time, Yi Fengtian roared in grief and indignation. His 4 limbs were already broken, and there was not a single part of his body that was still intact. He kept knocking his forehead against the ground, using his indomitable will to lift half of his body off the ground. Yi Xian looked at his rebellious disciple indifferently. This time he didn't do anything. He let Yi Fengtian hit the ground with his forehead, trying his best to lift his upper body off the ground. This scene was unbearable to watch. Even Yi Xian Mo, who wanted Yi Fengtian to die, couldn't bear to watch. Fengtian, hurry up and apologize to Master, Wan Hongling advised from afar. However, Yi Fengtian turned a deaf ear to her. He kept pressing his forehead against the ground and used the last of his strength to lift his upper body up. Finally, Yi Fengtian succeeded. Although his broken knees were badly mangled and his arms were swaying in front of him, his upper body was still upright. He looked straight at Yi Xian. Good. As expected of a disciple that Yi Xian raised. Even in this situation, you are still unyielding. Yi Xian nodded slowly. Master, I didn't do anything wrong. I just want to ask you to let go of the grudges of the past. Let go of the obsession in your heart. And let go of all the lives in the world. Yi Fengtian pleaded weakly. His gaze was firm and strong. Looking at Yi Fengtian's determined gaze, Yi Xian fell silent. A self-deprecating smile appeared on his face. So this is your law and Tao. This is your Tao heart. Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. He looked up at the universe and sighed. Lord of Fengtian? Why not call him the Lord of Life? Yi Fengtian walked the path of life. He also walked the path of life. That was how he became the Lord of the 11th Yuan Hui. However, the path he walked was the opposite of Yi Xian's. In order to save the world, Yi Fengtian didn't hesitate to fight against Yi Xian. It wasn't that Yi Fengtian betrayed Yi Xian. It was just that his Tao was the opposite of Yi Xian's. Yi Xian was a master of killing, but his disciple believed in the principle of life above all. This was where the conflict between master and disciple lay. At this moment, Yi Xian thought of an old friend of his from the human world. Gu Xiaoxiao. This woman was the same back then. She was a kind and sincere person. Unfortunately, she died in Yi Xian's arms. Even in death, she believed that the world was kind. At this moment, Yi Xian felt like he had gone through a reincarnation cycle. The things that happened back then were happening to his disciple again. At this moment, Yi Xian felt some regret. He regretted accepting Yi Fengtian as his disciple back then. That was why this battle between master and disciple happened. Fengtian, let me ask you, what is life? Yi Xian was silent for a long time. Then, he looked at Yi Fengtian again and asked a seemingly simple question. Chapter 1744. Life is simple, and the Grand Tao is boundless. Because of life, the entire universe exists. If life were to fade away, the chaos verse would cease to exist. Yi Xian gave a direct answer. You're wrong. Yi Xian slowly shook his head. All things are born to nourish man, but man has nothing to repay the heavens with. In the chaos verse, all life is insatiably greedy. They are the parasites of the universe, eating away at the chaos verse with each passing day. From birth to death, every living being eats away at everything around them. Babies need to breathe, mortals need to eat grains, and cultivators need to cultivate. They need to plunder all the resources in the chaos verse, all for the sake of their own survival. This is the true essence of life. We cultivators defy the heavens, but rather than fighting for our own lives, we plunder all the resources that can keep us alive. Whether it's killing or plundering, it's nothing more than a manifestation of the continuation of life. What do you think the strongest are? The strongest are nothing more than slaves of the chaos verse. Are you confused as to why you're still no match for me even though you've achieved the Tao of the present age? Let me tell you something. You're just a slave of the chaos verse, borrowing the power of the chaos verse. I've long since broken through this boundary. That's why you're no match for me. Taboo figures never come into being. That's because they're the resistors of life. They're the biggest parasites of the chaos verse. The chaos verse wants to destroy them, but they do everything they can to survive. Yi Xian spoke a lot, but the more he spoke, the more perplexed Yi Fengtian became. He was even more confused about the Tao of life. You've achieved the Tao of the present age, and you're the master of the 11th Aeon. But have you ever wondered why the chaos verse has 12 eons? What happens after the 12 eons? In the distant unknown past, there existed a previous chaos verse. From destruction to rebirth, this is the so-called cycle of reincarnation. Life is nothing but a joke in the face of the chaos verse. Yi Xian didn't know if he was talking to Yi Fengtian or talking to himself. By the time he finished, Yi Fengtian was completely lost. After a long time, he stared blankly at Yi Xian. Master, where is my Tao? The Tao is in your heart, Yi Xian replied calmly. The Tao is in your heart. Yi Fengtian was confused. But I don't know if the Tao in my heart is right or wrong. There is no right or wrong in this world, only strong or weak. If you think it's right, then it's right. If you think it's wrong, then it's definitely wrong. Yi Xian lightly said. I don't understand, Yi Fengtian said bitterly. It doesn't matter if you understand or not, Yi Xian said. Although you've achieved the Tao of the present age, you've only achieved the Tao of the chaos verse. You haven't clearly understood your own Tao. When you break free from the shackles of the chaos verse, you'll understand where your Tao is. In truth, there was something Yi Xian didn't say. If one day, Yi Fengtian truly broke free from the shackles of the chaos verse and truly understood his own Tao, then he would be able to break free from the omnipotence and become a forbidden figure. This was because every forbidden figure understood their relationship with the chaos verse. Only then would they be able to walk a heaven-defying path. This was why the chaos verse didn't tolerate forbidden figures. Even now, Yi Xian could faintly sense an invisible will pressing down on him. It constantly gave him a sense of danger. Silence. Heaven and earth were silent. At this moment, Yi Fengtian was still confused. He hadn't reached Yi Xian's level yet, so he couldn't see his own body clearly. I've disobeyed you, master. Please kill me. Finally, Yi Fengtian broke the silence. He bitterly begged Yi Xian. Master, please don't. Wan Hongling's expression was sorrowful. She crawled over to Yi Fengtian and bitterly begged Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian looked at his two traitorous disciples indifferently. There wasn't the slightest ripple in his eyes. Beside him, Yi Xian's expression kept changing. He didn't know if Yi Xian would kill the two of them. Xuanma, heal their injuries and imprison them in the demonic heavenly palace forever. Without my permission, they're not allowed to take half a step out of the palace. Finally, Yi Xian calmly gave his two traitorous disciples a sentence. He stepped out and returned to the demonic heavenly palace. Yes, master. Yi Xuanma's eyes flickered. He hurriedly agreed, grabbed Yi Fengtian and Wan Hongling, and turned into a beam of light to follow Yi Xian. In fact, according to Yi Xian's temperament, the two traitorous disciples should have died for disobeying him. It wasn't that Yi Xian felt pity for them, nor was it that he didn't have the heart to kill them. It was that whether or not he killed the two traitorous disciples was of no use to Yi Xian, because Yi Xian clearly knew that even if he killed the two traitorous disciples today, someone else would take their place in the future. Although the two traitorous disciples disobeyed him, they didn't really betray Yi Xian. It was just that Yi Xian's Tao of life was the opposite of Yi Xian's. Therefore, sparing the two traitorous disciples' lives was very useful to Yi Xian. Although Yi Fengtian disobeyed him, he never really wanted to be enemies with Yi Xian. This was also one of the reasons why Yi Xian spared their lives. Moreover, Yi Xian faintly deduced that Yi Fengtian's current state was inseparably related to the three paragons. Needless to say, the Lord of Space and Yi Xian were close friends. However, fate and chaos were different. After countless years, Yi Fengtian must have had a very deep relationship with the two. As mentioned before, the Chaos Verse had three fundamental edicts: chaos, fate, space, and time. None of these edicts could be missing. The three paragons could be said to be the true representatives of the Chaos Verse. Yi Fengtian's Tao of life was pure and simple. He was easily bewitched by chaos and fate. Of course, this was all Yi Xian's speculation. However, Yi Xian was certain that Yi Fengtian's transformation had something to do with the three paragons. The paramount demonic palace. Clang! With a loud bang, the door of the divine prison was slammed shut. Yi Fengtian and Wan Hongling were thrown into the divine prison. Without Yi Xian's permission, they would never be able to take half a step out of the palace. Junior brother, junior sister, since Master has confined you here, you can stay here with peace of mind. Don't say that I didn't take care of you. If you need anything, you can ask me. After all, you were unkind to me, but I can't be unkind to you. Ha ha ha. Yi Xian laughed proudly and left. Yi Fengtian and Wan Hongling's aura was weak. They could only watch bitterly as Yi Xian left. The two paragons were imprisoned in the palace of the paramount demonic palace. This was a disaster for them, but there was nothing they could do. After all, they were enemies of Yi Xian. Fengtian, why don't you apologize to Master? Is it really okay to be so stubborn? Inside the divine prison, Wan Hongling said bitterly. Yi Fengtian was silent. At this moment his eyes were dazed. Clearly, he didn't know whether what he did was right or wrong. Sigh. Wan Hongling sighed. The husband and wife could only stay in the divine prison for the time being. They didn't know when Master would let them out. Chapter 1745. The Demonic Heavenly Palace. Yi Xian leaned lazily on the throne of the strongest. He rested his chin on one hand and fell into deep thought. His eyes were sometimes deep and sometimes dark. Master, I have already sent the two of them to the divine prison. Yi Xuanma strode over and bowed to Yi Xian. His face was full of reverence and devotion. Even his words were careful. This time, Yi Xuanma was completely convinced. He did not even dare to think of becoming enemies with Yi Xian. Among the three disciples, you are the most obedient. Not bad, not bad. Yi Xian praised Yi Xuanma. I don't dare. It is what I should do. Yi Xuanma hurriedly said humbly. Then he paused for a moment and said, but I don't know if I should say something. Speak. Yi Xian said. Yi Fengtian and Wan Hongling are both extremely strong. I'm afraid a small prison won't be able to trap them. Master, you're here of course. But if you leave, I'm afraid the two of them. Yi Xian hesitated. They don't dare. Yi Xian said. Master, you are mighty. I was stupid. Yi Xuanma's expression changed slightly. He hurriedly flattered his master. Indeed, a small divine prison would not be able to trap the two strongest. However, as long as Yi Xian was alive, the two of them would not dare to step out of the divine prison. Moreover, Yi Xuanma had already realized that his master did not kill the two of them because of their old friendship. He still needed to figure out his master's intentions. Master, you are kind. Not killing them is the greatest kindness you have shown them. I hope that the two of them can repent in time. Then, they will not let you down. Yi Xuanma smiled. Kind. Yi Xian smiled. He looked at Yi Xian and said, my good disciple, this is the first time someone has said that I'm benevolent. But you're right. I didn't kill them, because I'm giving them a chance. It's also a grace to them. Yi Xuanma smiled awkwardly. However, he found it increasingly difficult to see through Yi Xian. He kept warning himself to speak less in front of Yi Xian, in case he said something wrong, and offended Yi Xian. Master, now that the two of them are locked up in the divine prison, the Life Sacred Hall and Human Tao Sacred Hall have no masters. If they don't show up for a long time, the two supreme orthodoxies will definitely change. Moreover, junior brother Feng Tian is the master of the 11th Yuan Hui. If others were to know that he was imprisoned here, it would probably cause a huge commotion. Yi Xianmo rolled his eyes and said, "Just tell me what you're thinking." Yi Xian looked at Yi Xianmo calmly. He saw through the other party's thoughts with a single glance. If Yi Xian guessed correctly, Yi Xianmo wanted to take this opportunity to become the master of the 11th Yuan Hui. He also wanted to take over the two supreme orthodoxies. As expected, Yi Xianmo's face flushed red. He bowed to Yi Xian and said, "I'm not talented, but I'm willing to go through fire and water for Master. I'd like to boldly ask Master to support me as the master of the 11th Yuan Hui and take over the two supreme orthodoxies. This way, I can work better for Master." After Yi Xianmo finished speaking, he looked at Yi Xian nervously. He did not know if Yi Xian would agree to his request. Yi Xianmo was a person who knew how to adapt to circumstances. He also knew that he was just a tool in Yi Xian's hands. To put it bluntly, even if he turned into a supreme expert, he was just a lackey in the eyes of Yi Xian. He would bite whoever Yi Xian asked him to. However, Yi Xianmo was very clear about the reality. Even if he had to be a lackey, he wanted to be the strongest lackey. So what if he was extremely lowly in front of Yi Xian? In the outside world, he was a supreme existence. Thump, thump, thump. Yi Xian's 5 fingers knocked on the table. He kept making rhythmic sounds, as if he was considering Yi Xianmo's suggestion. Yi Xianmo was also waiting nervously. He did not know if Yi Xian would agree to his request. All right. Finally, after 10 breaths, Yi Xian nodded slowly and agreed to Yi Xianmo's request. Yi Xianmo was overjoyed. He quickly kowtowed to Yi Xian to express his gratitude. However, Yi Xianmo's heart skipped a beat. He once again advised Yi Xian, "However, if I take over two supreme orthodoxies, I will definitely attract the attention of other supreme experts, especially the 3 supreme experts. I'm afraid." Yi Xian had long seen through Yi Xianmo's intentions. However, this was also an opportunity for Yi Xian. "Since I've agreed to your request, I will naturally make the decision for you. Send out invitations to the supreme experts and invite them here. I will appear when the time comes," Yi Xian said calmly. "Thank you, Master. I will go and make the preparations now." Yi Xianmo was overjoyed. He quickly thanked Yi Xian and left quickly. Looking at Yi Xianmo leaving excitedly, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. A deep look flashed across his eyes. Yi Xian knew better than anyone else what kind of person Yi Xianmo was. This disciple with ulterior motives was only using him to build momentum and achieve his goal of becoming the 11th Yuan Hui's master. However, Yi Xian was also using him. After all, Yi Xian Yuan Hui would temporarily become the master of the 11th Yuan Hui and lead 3 supreme orthodoxies. This was still very beneficial to Yi Xian. After all, Yi Xianmo was obedient enough. He would bite whoever Yi Xian asked him to. He would never dare to go against Yi Xian's will. Of course, this was built on the premise that Yi Xian was strong enough. If Yi Xian did not have his current cultivation, Yi Xianmo would have killed his master long ago. Why would he be so humble to Yi Xian? And this was the biggest difference between Yi Xianmo and Yi Fengtian. Yi Xianmo was obedient enough. This was built on the foundation of Yi Xian's supreme cultivation. On the other hand, Yi Fengtian was different. Even if Yi Xian did not have his current cultivation, Yi Fengtian would still respect his master and would never have the intention to harm him. This was because he had always been grateful to his master for treating him well. He was also grateful to Yi Xian. However, the reason why the master and disciple quarreled to this point was because of their different ideals. Perhaps this was one of the reasons why Yi Xian did not kill Yi Fengtian. Even Yi Xian himself might not be able to tell his true thoughts. As for supporting Yi Xian, it was just a side effect. Yi Xian's real goal was the three supreme experts. He also wanted to take this opportunity to settle the grudges between him and the supreme experts in the past. First of all, Yi Xian's most important goal was the heaven-shattering cauldron. Each of the three supreme experts had one. This was something he was determined to obtain. Secondly, Yi Xian was once his enemy. They had almost killed him several times in the past. Yi Xian would definitely settle the score with the two of them. Some people might ask why Fate and Yi Xian had such a deep grudge. Why would the Master of Chaos be part of Yi Xian's list of people to settle the score with? In fact, it was mentioned before that in order to break Yi Xian's calamity transformation, the Master of Immortality personally went to the Chaos Temple and borrowed the Chaos Divine Mirror from the Master of Chaos. He even joined forces with the Master of Fate to kill Yi Xian once. Although the Master of Chaos did not directly oppose Yi Xian, he had always secretly wanted him dead. Yi Xian had never forgotten this karma. He would definitely settle the score with the Master of Chaos. Of course, the heaven-shattering cauldron in the hands of the Master of Chaos was also something Yi Xian was determined to obtain. Chapter 1746. Third, the Heaven-Devouring Demon Master. Back then, Yi Xian had joined forces with the Heaven-Devouring Demon Master to kill the Undying Heaven Lord. However, this was only a transaction of interests. Yi Xian had also paid the complete Calamity Immortal technique. Before this, the Heaven-Devouring Demon Master had tried to kill Yi Xian several times. Yi Xian had always kept this grudge in his heart. Fourth, the Undying Heaven Lord. Yi Xian really wanted to see if the current Undying Heaven Lord was the same person as before. If it was, Yi Xian would naturally kill him. If it wasn't, Yi Xian was also very curious about who had taken over the position of Undying. As for the remaining few supreme beings, there was no need to talk about the Extreme Love Master. The Lord of Destruction and the Lord of all Spirits also had some interactions with Yi Xian. Just treat it as a meeting between old friends. Yi Xian seemed to be supporting Yi Xuanma, but in reality, his true goal was only for himself. This gathering of the strongest was the time for him, Yi Xian, to settle old scores. But here came the problem. Settling old scores was only one of the reasons. His real goal was the three heaven-shattering cauldrons. However, it was indeed extremely difficult to take these supreme treasures away from the three supreme beings. Yi Xian frowned slightly as a deep look flashed across his eyes. Obviously, this matter was somewhat difficult to handle. After experiencing a dream that spanned more than 700 million years, Yi Xian was very confident that he could suppress all the supreme beings. These supreme beings couldn't compare to him in terms of cultivation. However, it was hard to say for the three supreme beings. It wasn't that their cultivation was stronger than Yi Xian's, but the legendary three long rivers. The three supreme beings could use the three long rivers. Even if Yi Xian's cultivation was higher than theirs, he might not be able to make them submit. Moreover, with the relationship between the Lord of Spacetime and Yi Xian couldn't use force. He could only negotiate. What Yi Xian needed to consider now was how to subdue chaos and fate. Moreover, a full 700 million years had passed. Not only had Yi Xian's cultivation improved, but Heaven-Devouring Demon Master, who had obtained the Tribulation Transcender technique, had also become much stronger. As for the cultivation levels of the other supreme beings, this was still an unknown. It was highly possible that unforeseen events would occur. Actually, Yi Xian's initial plan was to deal with them one by one. That was the safest way. However, taking advantage of this opportunity, Yi Xian also wanted to give it a try. With his current cultivation of the 12 heavenly gates, it shouldn't be difficult for him to suppress these supreme experts. After all, he had fallen into the great dream of eternity for more than 700 million years, crossing an entire Yuanhui period. That was why Yi Fengtian was able to achieve his Tao so quickly with the power of life, and become the master of the 11th Aeon. A mere Yi Xian doesn't have this ability. Could it be that even the Chaos Heavenly Punishment couldn't kill him? Has he reappeared? The Lord of Destiny whispered in a trembling voice. The Lord of Destiny couldn't think of anyone who had the ability to suppress two supreme beings. Apart from the three of them, only taboo characters had this ability. The three of them didn't make a move, and it was even more impossible for a taboo character to do so. Then, the only answer was Yi Xian. Time and Space Palace. The Lord of Time and Space frowned. He vaguely felt that something was wrong, and he thought of many things. Could it be him? The Lord of Time and Space was shocked. Heaven-devouring demon palace. Yi Xian. The heaven-devouring demon lord's eyes were sinister. He casually turned the invitation in his hand into ashes, and a sinister smile appeared on his face. The current heaven-devouring demon lord was even more terrifying. Ever since he obtained the complete tribulation transcender technique, his cultivation had increased crazily in the past 700 million years. He had reached the peak of supreme beings. The current heaven-devouring demon lord was completely comparable to the former lord of human Tao. He was only one step away from attracting the taboo tribulation. His cultivation could be said to be terrifying. 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace, Destruction Demonic Palace, Extreme Emotion Temple. When the three supreme beings received Yi Xian's invitation, they were all shocked by the contents of the invitation. They couldn't believe that Yi Xian had the ability to suppress two supreme beings. The three of them had different thoughts, especially the Extreme Emotion Master. She was faintly excited, and she was even guessing if Yi Xian had returned. Although Yi Xian was suspected to have fallen under the Chaos Heavenly Punishment, the Extreme Emotion Master had always believed that Yi Xian wouldn't die. He would definitely appear at some point in time. It was just that she had waited for more than 700 million years, and there was still no news of Yi Xian. She almost thought that Yi Xian had really fallen. The Extreme Emotion Master didn't believe that Yi Xian could suppress two supreme beings. The only person who had this ability was most likely Yi Xian. Immortal Heaven Palace. A figure surrounded by black light was sitting cross-legged in the void. This person wore a ghost mask on his face, making it impossible to see his expression. Chapter 1747. Impossible. Is he really not dead? The masked man muttered in fear. The destructive energy around him was extremely chaotic. If one were to observe carefully, they would notice that he was trembling slightly, as if he had encountered a great terror that he had never experienced before. Yi Xuanma, Yi Fengtian, Wan Hongling. The masked man knew the cultivation of these three better than anyone else. He even knew the techniques that they cultivated. Yi Xuanma said that he had suppressed two of the strongest. That was simply a joke. It was even more ridiculous. Therefore, the masked man was sure that something earth-shattering would happen in this sovereign's assembly. The masked man was not afraid of anything else. He was only afraid that the legendary person would appear. Because he hated and feared this person at the same time, it was also mixed with a shadow that could not be erased. I am now the strongest of all time. So what if you really come back? The masked man roared. However, if one were to listen carefully, they would notice that his voice was trembling uncontrollably. The demonic heavenly palace. Inside the divine prison, Yi Fengtian and Wan Hongling were sitting cross-legged. Their injuries had mostly recovered. At this moment, they were surrounded by the strongest energy as they adjusted their breathing. Junior brother, junior sister, let me tell you a piece of good news. The strongest orthodoxies that you created are now under my control. Yi Xuanma strode into the divine prison with an indescribable excitement on his face. Then I really have to congratulate you. Yi Fengtian slowly opened his eyes. He looked at Yi Xuanma without any emotions in his eyes. This was because he had already expected this result. Yi Xuanma originally wanted to see Yi Fengtian make a fool of himself. However, when he saw Yi Fengtian's indifferent attitude, anger rose in Yi Xuanma's heart. He sneered and said, "My good junior brother, I forgot to tell you. Master has already agreed to let me take charge of the 11th Yuan Hui." "So what?" Yi Fengtian said calmly. The calmer Yi Fengtian was, the more Yi Xuanma could not control the anger in his heart. "What a pity. I invited the strongest to the sovereign's assembly. Junior brother, you and your wife can only stay in the divine prison. This is really a pity," Yi Xuanma said sarcastically. "What? Initially, Yi Fengtian's face was expressionless. However, the moment he heard that Yi Xuanma had invited the utmost powerful beings, he was shocked beyond words. Apparently, Yi Xuanma did not have the guts to do so. His master must have instructed him to do so. If Yi Fengtian's guess was right, this ruler's assembly was the time when Yi Xian would settle his scores with the other strongest cultivators. "I want to see Master," Yi Fengtian shouted. "Meet Master?" Yi Xuanma sneered. "Just stay in the divine prison. Master doesn't want to see you." After the conference of sovereigns is over, Master will suppress all these supreme experts one by one. By then, I will be second only to one person. Let's see how you can go against me in the future. Yi Xuanma, are you out of your mind? Don't you know what kind of horrifying consequences it would cause if Master were to engage in a battle with these utmost powerful beings? Yi Fengtian roared in rage. Ha ha ha. Consequences? Yi Xuanma laughed menacingly. What does the life and death of all living beings have to do with me? Even if the heavens collapse and the earth shatters and the stars shift, it has nothing to do with me. If Master can kill these utmost powerful beings, that would be the best outcome. Master, I want to see you. Yi Fengtian had no time to care about Yi Xuanma. He shouted loudly in the divine prison, hoping that Yi Xian would meet him. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not respond at all. Yi Xuanma left with a smug smile. The demonic heavenly palace, looking at the sky without speaking, hearing the earth move without being shocked. Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. He looked at the chaotic starry sky calmly. Yi Fengtian's roar rang in his ears, but it did not cause any ripples in his heart. Let's settle our scores one by one. After so many years, I really want to see if you can go against my immortal 12 heavenly gates. Yi Xian said softly. Immortal 12 heavenly gates. That's right. Strictly speaking, Yi Xian was still in the immortal realm. However, he had cultivated the 12 heavenly gates. His combat strength had already surpassed the so-called strongest of all time. Rumble. Yi Xian's entire body trembled as the 12 heavenly gates rose up behind him. After that, they rumbled as they rotated. The mysterious heaven burial reincarnation halo illuminated Yi Xian in a majestic and mysterious manner. The 12 immortal 12 heavenly gates are compatible with the chaos? Yi Xian's eyes were deep as he fell into deep thought. In fact, when Yi Xian woke up from the eternal dream, he had been thinking about one thing, and that was his immortal 12 heavenly gates. After more than 700 million years of reincarnation in the eternal dream, he had opened the last heavenly gate. However, this was not Yi Xian's final goal. Yi Xian's biggest hope was to break through to the immortal realm. Yes, to break through to the immortal realm. All 12 heavenly gates had been opened. Yi Xian could take another step forward and merge the 12 heavenly gates, which was the so-called immortal great perfection stage. His combat strength would increase by another level. When he merged the 12 heavenly gates, he would be able to wrestle with the taboo characters. Although he might not be as strong as them, the difference would be very small. Of course, all these were Yi Xian's deductions. As for whether it was true, he would only know after fighting with the taboo characters. What Yi Xian was really concerned about was the realm after the immortal realm. This realm was definitely not the half-step omnipotent realm, or the all-ages omnipotent realm. It was a realm that he had never heard of. Only the taboo characters knew about this realm. Breaking through the immortal realm and entering the next realm was not as simple as it seemed. It was a qualitative change that would shake the heavens and earth. At this moment, Yi Xian was already terrifyingly powerful. If he could step into the next realm, how terrifying would his combat strength and cultivation be? Would he be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the taboo characters? Or surpass the taboo characters? As Yi Xian pondered this question, his heart was faintly excited. He was incomparably looking forward to the next great realm. Phew! Yi Xian exhaled slowly. He calmed himself down. Now was not the time to think about this question. What he needed to do now was to merge the 12 heavenly gates. However, he had not found the opportunity yet. However, Yi Xian had a vague feeling that this opportunity would appear soon. This feeling was so strong that Yi Xian believed it without a doubt. The stars moved. 10,000 years passed in the blink of an eye. There were demonic sounds and strange phenomena. The entire extreme demonic shrine was shining with majestic light. There were even chariots coming from all directions. They were people from various orthodoxies. This time, they were all here to participate in the sovereign banquet held by the extreme demonic shrine. The sovereign banquet was filled with clouds. Yi Xian sat on the main seat. A group of extreme demonic shrine disciples sat on the main seat. There were also guests from all directions. The entire sovereign banquet was terrifyingly quiet. Rumble. In an instant, the clouds were swept away by the wind. Several ancient auras could be felt. There were also many majestic figures walking toward the extreme demonic shrine. They were the various immortals who had come for the banquet. Chapter 1748. Ancient, majestic, and boundless. The first to arrive were the three utmost powerful beings. The three of them came together, surrounded by the aura of utmost powerful beings, attracting the respect of all living beings. The three utmost powerful beings had existed since time immemorial, and they were also the oldest utmost powerful beings. However, the three of them did not move at all. This was enough to show how terrifying they were. Rumble. The demonic aura of the sky-devouring demon master was unparalleled. Black clouds that covered the sky rolled over. The sky-devouring demon master stepped down from the sky and appeared in the ruler's assembly almost at the same time as the three utmost powerful beings. Then, the extreme love master arrived, followed by the destruction master and the master of all spirits. However, the two of them were very low-key and did not reveal any cultivation base. In the previous Yuan Hui, the master of all spirits was in charge. However, in the 11th Yuan Hui, the master of all spirits had the lowest cultivation base among these utmost powerful beings. After all, his era had passed. Moreover, he had attained Dao in the 10th Yuan Hui. His cultivation base was ranked last among the utmost powerful beings. With the arrival of the 7 utmost powerful beings, only the Deathless Heaven Master was not here. This made Yi Xuanma frown slightly. Why was the Deathless Heaven Master not here? However, Yi Xuanma did not have time to ponder over this question. He smiled and strode towards the 7 utmost powerful beings, saying, "My friends, you have all come from afar. I am very gratified. Please take a seat." As Yi Xuanma spoke, he came to the side of the extreme love master and did something that surprised the other utmost powerful beings. Disciple Yi Xuanma pays his respects to mistress. Yi Xuanma was all smiles as he bowed 3 times to the extreme love master. He even lowered his posture to the utmost. Where was the attitude of an utmost powerful being? At this moment, the other utmost powerful beings were slightly gloomy. After all, they were all utmost powerful beings. However, Yi Xuanma was so humble to the extreme love master and treated them like air. This difference was indeed embarrassing for them. However, Yi Xuanma did not care about what they thought. He did not care about these utmost powerful beings at all. He only wanted to leave a good impression on the extreme love master. After all, the extreme love master was Yi Xian's wife in name. As a disciple, he naturally could not be rude. If the extreme love master were to say something to Yi Xian, he would be in deep trouble. Of course, these were the thoughts of Yi Xuanma. The other utmost powerful beings naturally did not know about this. You and I are both utmost powerful beings. There's no need for such formalities, fellow Taoist. Extreme Love Master was taken aback as well, but she still returned the greeting. The Extreme Love Master was also very confused. Although Yi Xian was Yi Xian's disciple, the two of them had not interacted much after Yi Xian achieved Dao. Although they had met several times, Yi Xuanma had always addressed her as fellow cultivator. How could he possibly address her as master's wife? Suddenly, Extreme Love Master's eyes trembled. He suddenly thought of a possibility. Could it be that he had returned? At this moment, the Extreme Love Master was extremely agitated. This was the only possibility that could make Yi Xuanma behave so humbly. "Ma'am, you don't have to think too much. Just take a seat," Yi Xuanma said with a big smile. "All right." The Extreme Love Master calmed herself down and sat down at Yi Xuanma's invitation. She looked around the ruler's conference, hoping to see the person she had been waiting for. At the same time, the expressions of the other utmost powerful beings changed slightly. After all, they were not fools. From Yi Xuanma's attitude towards the extreme love master, they could vaguely guess something. Dang dang dang. 81 bells rang at this moment, echoing continuously in the extreme demon shrine. This meant that the ruler's conference had officially begun. Everyone has come from afar to attend my ruler's conference. I am extremely honored. Yi Xuanma looked around at the guests and even smiled politely at the 7 utmost powerful beings. He then continued, I believe everyone has heard that I have the intention to do good for all living beings. Today, I am holding the ruler's conference to officially take over the Lord of Sealed Skies and take over the 11th Yuan Hui. Pray to the chaos and bless all living beings. Although I have not made many contributions, but wait. Suddenly, before Yi Xuanma could finish, a cold voice interrupted him. This made Yi Xuanma's face turn cold. He slowly looked towards the source of the voice. Master of Destiny. Obviously, the person who interrupted Yi Xuanma was the Master of Destiny. What is the matter, Master of Destiny? Yi Xuanma asked coldly. At this moment, the Master of Fate was unperturbed. His eyes were emotionless. He looked at Yi Xuanma indifferently, then looked around and said, You want to control the 11th Yuan Hui? You are not qualified. Moreover, you alone cannot suppress the Lord of Sealing Skies and the Lord of Human Tao. Ha ha ha. Yi Xuanma laughed. His laughter was extremely sinister. The entire ruler's conference fell silent. All the living beings looked at each other in shock. After all, this was a conversation between the utmost powerful beings. They did not dare to make any noise. That's right. I indeed do not have the ability to suppress the 2 utmost powerful beings. However, whether I am qualified to take over the 11th Yuan Hui is not something that you, Master of Destiny, can decide. Yi Xuanma said fearlessly, You are very bold. You speak more confidently than before. Seems like this is the confidence given to you by the people behind you. The Master of Destiny was still looking around, as if he was looking for someone. Although Yi Xuanma had attained the Tao, he had once met the 3 utmost powerful beings. However, he still behaved rather humbly. How would he dare to talk to the Master of Destiny so forcefully? Brother Yi Xian, since you are already here, why are you still hiding? All of a sudden, the Lord of Chaos stood up slowly. The power of chaos surrounded him. That ancient and heavy voice reverberated throughout the ruler's conference. Yi Xian, since you are not dead yet, come out. The sky-devouring demon master sneered. He had never taken Yi Xian seriously. The reason why he came here this time was because he guessed that Yi Xian was the mastermind. Mister, the extreme love master could not sit still anymore. He began to call out to Yi Xian. Yi Xian. The destruction master and the myriad spirit master's expressions changed slightly. Although they had guessed this as well, their hearts still trembled violently when they saw the truth. Hee. Suddenly, just as all the living beings were bewildered, a chuckle rose in the ruler's conference. The void rippled, and a figure gradually appeared. Yi Xian, dressed in black, his hair was snow-white, like the Milky Way behind his head. He stood in the void with his hands behind his back. He looked at the 7 utmost powerful beings calmly with a deep smile on his face. It is indeed you. Boom! The Master of Destiny stood up abruptly. The merciless power of destiny was on the spot. His eyes of destiny were spinning terrifyingly, proving how agitated his heart was. Mister, the extreme love master bit her lips. She looked at Yi Xian in a daze. When she saw Yi Xian again, the emotions that she had suppressed for so many years were finally released. Yi Xian nodded at the extreme love master to calm her down. Then he looked at the Master of Destiny and the rest. I was wondering who was so capable. So it was you who suppressed 2 utmost powerful beings. No wonder a mere Yi Xian dares to hold a ruler's conference. The sky-devouring demon master sneered. Chapter 1749. Yi Daoyu. The Lord of all spirits and the Lord of destruction had complicated expressions on their faces, as they cupped their fists and greeted Yi Xian. Yi Daoyu, it's been years since we last met. Your cultivation state has grown even stronger. The Lord of Chaos looked at Yi Xian with a complicated expression. Even though he had expected Yi Xian to appear alive, he could not help but feel a sense of helplessness when Yi Xian appeared before him in the flesh. Revered master, please take a seat. Yi Xian's robes fluttered as an utmost being's throne appeared. His entire being was even more pious than before. Yi Xian ascended into the skies and sat down calmly on the utmost being's throne. He looked down at the utmost beings present with a condescending attitude. Gasp! Such a scene caused all of the living beings to gasp, and an uproar could be heard. Who is he? Even the Lord of the Extreme Demonic is addressing him as revered master? Don't be silly. Can't you see that all the utmost beings are addressing him as fellow Taoist? He's the master of Emperor Zongtian, Yi Xian. He was the greatest fear of the previous Yuan Hui. To think that he would still be alive. All sorts of shocking discussions rang out. There were even veteran sect masters who spoke out in a trembling voice, introducing Yi Xian's background to those who did not know of Yi Xian's identity. Master of Emperor Zongtian? Could he be an utmost being of the ancient times as well? That can't be right. Out of the 11 utmost beings of the ancient times, why have I never heard of Emperor Zongtian before? Someone exclaimed out. Clearly, they did not know about Yi Xian's past at all. Even though Emperor Zongtian isn't an utmost being, he's on an equal footing with one. He's also the only person in history who can stand on the same level as an utmost being. Some veteran sect master explained in a hushed voice. There were even some veteran sect masters who uncovered the dusty history and recounted some of Yi Xian's deeds back in the day. Hearing this, all the living beings present were even more shocked. Their bewildered gazes were now filled with respect. He suppressed the great sects of the 8 directions, killed the strongest experts of all time, swept through the great enemies of the heavens, and even nurtured the 3 strongest disciples. When these stories were recounted one by one, all living beings sucked in a breath of cold air. There were even some who were mentally weak that their teeth were chattering. Everyone, Master has ordered me to take charge of the 11th Yuan Hui. Are there any other questions? Yi Xian looked at the utmost powerful beings present without any fear. His lips curled into a smug grin. Right now, he had Yi Xian as his backing. Naturally, he had sufficient confidence. What a despicable person. This is not the place for you to speak. Boom! The Master of Fate soared into the sky as his terrifying power of fate rippled out. He stared straight at Yi Xian, completely disregarding Yi Xian. Yi Xian, you shouldn't have appeared, the Master of Fate said emotionlessly. Hee. Yi Xian stood up from his throne and walked towards the Master of Fate calmly. His lips curled into a strange smile as he said, Fate, you clearly know that this ruler's assembly was intentionally arranged by me. Yet you still dare to come. I have to say that you're really gutsy. Aren't you afraid of dying here? With just you. Usually the Master of Fate would not smile. This was because he believed in the Tao of Fate. It was also rare for him to smile. However, at this moment he smiled. It was just that his smile was extremely emotionless, as if he had just heard the funniest joke in the world. With just me? It's enough to kill you, Yi Xian replied calmly. All right, this lord wants to see how much you've grown after experiencing a Yuan Hui, and more than 700 million years. You actually dare to speak such arrogant words to this lord. Could it be that you think I'm the immortal of the past? The Master of Fate spoke emotionlessly. He could naturally feel the threat that Yi Xian brought to him. Clearly, Yi Xian was no longer the same as before. He was even stronger and more terrifying than before. But who was he? He was the Master of Fate, who controlled the fate of all living beings. He was also the second strongest in the chaotic universe. Why would he need to fear Yi Xian? A mere strongest like you dares to be so impudent? Yi Xian's face turned cold. Perhaps he might have been a little wary of the Master of Fate in the past. But now he did not care at all. Rumble. The world shook. Fate was merciless. Streaks of terrifying fate energy soared into the sky and pierced through the starry universe. At this moment, the Master of Fate had raised his cultivation to the peak. It was so terrifying that no one could look straight at him. Come, let me see how capable you are. Today, we'll settle the old scores between us, Yi Xian said calmly. Fellow Taoists, let's talk things out. Why must you fight to the death? Suddenly, before the two of them could make a move, the Master of Chaos hurriedly stood between them. However, this time around, Yi Xian did not give him any face. Instead, he said coldly, Chaos, back then, you made use of the undying Chaos God Mirror to harm me. You have to give me an explanation for this matter. Once I'm done with this trash fate, it's time for us to settle this karma. You? The face of the Master of Chaos changed. He had not expected Yi Xian to say this at this moment. Was he not afraid that he would join forces with fate? However, the Master of Chaos hesitated and did not make this decision. As for the Master of Fate, he was already impatient. Chaos, I've already said that he's a foreign being and must be killed. Since you've been hesitating, I can kill him myself right now. Hurry up and leave, the Master of Fate barked out coldly. The eyes of the Master of Chaos flickered as he retreated from the battlefield. Since Fate was going to make a move, he might as well take a good look at Yi Xian's cultivation state before deciding what to do next. Yi Xian, even if your cultivation state is that of a Tong Tian, you will still be reduced to ashes by fate. Rumble. Eternal heaven, eternal fate. The entire world was exploding violently, proving that the Master of Fate saw Yi Xian as an unprecedented enemy. He was determined to fight to the death with Yi Xian. You talk too much nonsense. Just like you're just a piece of trash, Yi Xian said sarcastically. Since the birth of the chaotic universe, Yi Xian was the only one who dared to say such a thing. This left all the living beings in the world speechless. Fate is like the heavens, all laws shall be destroyed. Chi chi chi. The Master of Fate formed hand seals with both hands and cast the fate-killing art. Everything within 100 million miles collapsed as a palm of fate appeared. Let's go. The faces of the other supreme beings changed slightly. The battle between the two of them was going to destroy the world. All of them shifted away. Yi Xian also shifted the entire extreme demonic shrine. He did not dare to stay on the battlefield for long. Otherwise, his orthodoxy would be reduced to ashes. Kill. Fate was merciless, killing everything in its path. That terrifying palm of fate was like an eternal blue sky that crushed down on Yi Xian. Rumble. Rumble. This attack caused the world to collapse. Nothing existed. It shattered the void within 100 million miles, and countless black cracks appeared. You're so weak that you dare to fight me with such a weak cultivation? Yi Xian was extremely disdainful. Rumble. A terrifying thing happened. The 12 heavenly gates rose behind Yi Xian like 12 blazing suns. At this moment, they were rotating in a terrifying manner, releasing a terrifying might that had never been seen before in the past. Rumble. The palm of fate had already landed. Everything within 100 million miles was sinking. Endless mountains were turning into ashes. Countless living beings died tragically under this attack of fate. However, what happened next was too strange and terrifying, causing the other spectators to be terrified into silence. They even sucked in a breath of cold air as they looked at Yi Xian with extreme fear. Chapter 1750. What did they see? Yi Xian. He was dressed in black, and his white hair hung down behind his head. The giant palm of fate above his head was crushing down on him. However, Yi Xian's body was glowing, and the 12 heavenly gates were rumbling and rotating. He actually ignored the Master of Fate's powerful attack. He was truly invincible. How can this be? The Master of Fate looked at him in shock. He knew that Yi Xian was very strong, but his attack actually couldn't do anything to Yi Xian. This was already beyond his expectations. You dare to be arrogant with me with this little ability? Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. He looked at the Master of Fate indifferently, and chose to ignore the giant palm of fate above his head. Boom! Yi Xian moved. He didn't seem to do anything, but with a flip of his hand, the so-called giant palm of fate exploded, and turned into specks of white light that dissipated between heaven and earth. It was as if it had never appeared. But it wasn't over yet. Boom! Sweeping across the universe and suppressing all life in the universe, Yi Xian suddenly raised his 5 fingers in front of the Master of Fate's frightened eyes. It was as if he was lifting up the ancient sky. Bang! It was as if the universe had exploded and heaven and earth had been turned upside down. Yi Xian's palm slapped out, and it directly turned into a giant palm of heaven that slapped down on the Master of Fate. Fate! The Master of Fate's expression changed greatly. He crazily urged the power of fate in his body, and an extremely terrifying halo appeared. He wanted to block Yi Xian's world-destroying attack. Unfortunately, the Master of Fate underestimated Yi Xian's attack. He also overestimated himself. Bang! Heaven and earth exploded, and everything fell silent. The giant palm of heaven slammed down on the Master of Fate's body, and the power of fate that surrounded him collapsed inch by inch. Pooh! A mouthful of blood spurted out from the Master of Fate's mouth. His body was cracking inch by inch. Yi Xian's attack was too unfathomable and too terrifying. It directly caused him to suffer an unimaginable calamity. Chi! The Master of Fate was like a meteor crashing into the earth. With a loud bang, his entire body smashed into the earth's core. What kind of joke was this? Now that Yi Xian had opened 12 gates of heaven, his cultivation base and battle prowess had long since surpassed the strongest of all time. How could the Master of Fate be his match? How can he be so strong? The heaven-devouring demon master, who had a disdainful look on his face, now looked extremely serious. He was completely flabbergasted by the fact that the Master of Fate had been suppressed so horribly. 12 heavenly gates. The Master of Chaos enunciated every word, and his expression was extremely solemn. He stared fixedly at the 12 heavenly gates revolving behind Yi Xian, and his eyes trembled violently. The sky exploded, and the void rippled. Yi Xian stood proudly at the top of the dome. He stood with his hands behind his back, and looked down at the boundless land. His eyes were emotionless and without desire. Occasionally, a cruel look would flash across his eyes. Yi Xian, you bastard, I want your life. Rumble! An earth-shattering roar came from the earth's core. The originally devastated earth suddenly exploded. The Master of Fate soared up from the earth's core, and charged towards Yi Xian with extreme anger. Being suppressed by Yi Xian in a single strike was the greatest insult to him. Even though he believed in the Tao of Fate, and rarely had human emotions, this kind of humiliation still made him furious. Kill! The Master of Fate crazily attacked Yi Xian. The merciless Master of Fate surged out, and the heaven and earth within millions of miles trembled. Boom! The Master of Fate's 5 fingers reached out towards the starry sky. The stars in the heavens fell at a terrifying speed. Countless stars turned into the most terrifying killing weapon, and smashed towards Yi Xian. A firefly dares to compete with the bright moon? Yi Xian shouted coldly. A pair of jade-like sword fingers slashed across the vast sky. Rays of heaven-burying sword light condensed, and then the entire heaven and earth became chaotic. Break! Yi Xian's sword pointed across the sky. Countless rays of sword light rampaged through the heaven and earth. The stars in the heavens that were falling towards him were all cut into 2, and then fell towards the earth. Rumble! Something terrifying happened. The stars fell, and all living beings suffered. The battle between the 2 of them caused an unimaginable calamity to the 5 regions of chaos. The heavens exploded, and the earth collapsed. The boundless mountains and seas turned into ashes. Underground lava spewed out. Countless living beings died tragically in the aftermath of the battle between the 2 of them. The strong were as heavy as a mountain, and the weak were like ants. In the battle between Yi Xian and Master of Fate, the 2 of them did not care about the lives of the living beings in the 5 regions. Even the other supreme experts watching the battle were the same. Everyone only cared about who would win this battle. They only cared about the outcome of this battle. Yi Xian die. Rumble! The Master of Fate roared mercilessly. He flipped his hand, and a white divine spear appeared in his hand. This spear was called the Spear of Fate, and it was one of the most terrifying chaos divine weapons. Kill! The Master of Fate struck out with his spear. The bright and merciless Spear of Fate tore through the heavens and earth as he charged towards Yi Xian. Trash will always be trash. You will never amount to anything. In the face of the Master of Fate's attack, Yi Xian sneered coldly. He did not care about the Master of Fate's attack at all. Rumble. Eternal reincarnation fist. Eternal reincarnation. Emptiness of the world. Yi Xian punched out. The terrifying heaven-burying reincarnation fist landed on the tip of the spear of fate, preventing the Master of Fate from advancing even half a step. I don't believe it. The Master of Fate roared. He frantically activated the divine weapon in his hand, wanting to pierce Yi Xian under his spear. Unfortunately, no matter how much he activated his cultivation, he could not do anything to Yi Xian. You are too weak. So weak that I have no interest in you. Rumble. Yi Xian roared cruelly. The eternal reincarnation fist rumbled. A crisp cracking sound rang out as the spear of fate that was charging towards him shattered. Kacha! After the sound of metal exploding, the spear of fate shattered. He had actually shattered the spear of fate with a single punch. However, this was not the end. This was merely the beginning. The beginning of a nightmare for the Master of Fate. Trash! Rumble! Yi Xian's punch did not diminish in the slightest. A furious roar rang out from his mouth. Today was the day for him to settle the old scores with the Master of Fate. All the sufferings he had suffered in the past, he would return to this person 10 times, 100 times. Bang! One punch. It was merely one punch. Yi Xian's punch sent the Master of Fate flying. A mouthful of blood spurted out from the Master of Fate's mouth. 3 of his ribs were broken, and one could faintly see the white bones and flesh in his chest. Rumble. Like the heavens and earth, it disappeared without a trace. Without waiting for the Master of Fate to stabilize himself, Yi Xian took a step forward and instantly appeared in front of the Master of Fate. He raised his 5 fingers and slapped the Master of Fate's face. Slap. This slap was more like a slap to the face. Although it would not cause too much damage to the Master of Fate, it was the greatest humiliation to him. A bright red palm print appeared on the Master of Fate's cheek. A bloody tooth flew out from his mouth. Chapter 1751. Yi Xian. The Master of Fate roared in anger. He could not believe that Yi Xian would humiliate him in such a way. This made him want to grind Yi Xian's bones into dust. Die! The Master of Fate roared in anger. He raised his arms and wanted to fight back. However, he had overestimated himself. How could he be a match for Yi Xian now? Piak! Yi Xian slapped the Master of Fate's face again. This time, Yi Xian was too ruthless. The Master of Fate's teeth were knocked out. Blood mixed with the teeth scattered everywhere. Die! Yi Xian roared sinisterly. His 5 fingers formed a fist as he punched the face of the Master of Destiny, causing his facial features to be completely unrecognizable. His entire face was soaked in blood, and his appearance could be said to be extremely miserable. Bam! Yi Xian stomped out with his right foot and sent the Master of Fate flying. The Master of Fate's body was already covered in blood. At this moment, the Master of Fate's body was torn apart even more. He fell to the ground in blood. This scene made everyone's scalp go numb. Fear filled their hearts. The faces of the various utmost powerful beings were pale, as they watched the Master of Fate being beaten up mercilessly by Yi Xian. They could not regain their senses for a long time. Boom! Yi Xian stomped down from the sky and appeared in front of the Master of Fate instantly. Before the Master of Fate could get up from the ground, a vicious and cruel smile appeared on his face. When the utmost powerful beings saw the smile on Yi Xian's face, their hearts trembled violently. And the cruel thing that happened next caused their faces to change drastically. Boom! 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 Yi Xian smiled cruelly. His right foot stomped down on the Master of Fate's limbs. Following the Master of Fate's painful roar, Yi Xian stomped his limbs into a bloody mess. Arg! The Master of Fate howled in pain. His howl shook the heavens and earth. It was mixed with incomparable shame and anger. The Master of Fate was also a human. Even if he cultivated the grand Tao of Fate, as long as he was still a human, he would still have human emotions. At this moment, his body was being cruelly ravaged. This was already causing him great pain. However, this was not the most important thing. Most importantly, Yi Xian was wantonly humiliating him, slowly stripping away his dignity as the Master of Fate. Yi Xian, you dare to humiliate me like this? I'm going to grind your bones to dust, so that you can never be reincarnated." The Master of Fate cursed furiously. He wanted to push his cultivation base to the limit in order to fight Yi Xian. What a pity! Just as Yi Xian had said, the Master of Fate was too weak. He was so weak that he wasn't even on the same level as Yi Xian. How could he be a match for Yi Xian? Humiliate you? Yi Xian laughed. However, his laughter made the Master of Fate's heart tighten. All 38,000 hairs on his body stood on end. An extreme coldness rose up in his heart, causing him to involuntarily shiver. Suddenly, an extremely bad feeling rose up in the Master of Fate's heart. However, before he could react, what happened next would become the greatest humiliation of his life. Bang! A muffled sound rang out. The Master of Fate felt half of his head sink into the ground. There was a heavy object on top of his head that was constantly crushing him. Boom! The Master of Fate was completely dumbfounded. He didn't dare to believe it, but he had no choice but to believe it. This was because the object on top of his head was actually Yi Xian's foot. At this moment, it was mercilessly crushing him. He was actually being trampled under Yi Xian's foot. He, the majestic Master of Fate, was actually being humiliated by Yi Xian to the point where his head was being stepped on. All was silent. The world was deathly still. At this moment, a scene appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Yi Xian's right foot was stepping on the Master of Fate's head, ruthlessly stomping him into the ground. There was a cruel and sinister smile on his face, as his foot continued to crush the Master of Fate's head. This was an unparalleled humiliation that had never been seen before. When this scene fell into everyone's eyes, the expressions of the supreme experts present changed drastically. This was no longer a battle to the death, but a naked humiliation and suppression. Not to mention whether the Master of Fate would die today. Even if he could survive, even if he could turn the tables and turn the tables, this scene would be the greatest humiliation of his life. He would never be able to wash away this humiliation. Moreover, he would become the greatest joke in the chaotic universe. Killing someone was just a matter of nodding his head to the ground. Although Yi Xian didn't kill anyone, he was destroying the Master of Fate's heart. This method was simply sinister and ruthless to the extreme. For the Master of Fate, it was an unprecedented nightmare. Yi Xian, you little bastard. This Master of Fate will not rest until you die. Suddenly, an earth-shattering roar of grief and indignation rang out. The Master of Fate's entire body erupted with a shocking light. The terrifying power of fate permeated the air, and the earth within 100 million miles trembled. Clearly, the Master of Fate had suffered an unprecedented humiliation. He had gone completely mad from the humiliation. At this moment, the only thought in his mind was to kill Yi Xian. However, was anger useful? The answer was it was useless. No matter how the Master of Fate roared in grief and indignation, no matter how desperately he urged the power of fate in his body, he couldn't break free from Yi Xian's foot. And this was the difference in strength. It was just like how Yi Xian had been powerless against a supreme expert in the past. He could only look for all sorts of opportunities to escape. It was impossible for him to have the strength to fight against Yi Xian. The strong are revered, the weak are dogs. At this moment, these words fully explained everything. No matter how furious the Master of Fate was, he could only feel a deep sense of powerlessness in front of Yi Xian. Be angry. Continue to be angry. Look at you being trampled under my foot like a dead dog. Doesn't this feel good? Yi Xian laughed sinisterly. He lifted his foot and continuously stomped on the Master of Fate's face. With each stomp, the Master of Fate's face was beyond recognition. Half of his body was trampled into the ground, and blood constantly flowed out. Bang! 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 Yi Xian happily and cruelly trampled on the Master of Fate. He was also venting his many years of accumulated resentment. The so-called Master of Fate was simply a joke in front of him. What supreme expert in the past? What power of fate? At this moment in front of Yi Xian, they were all bullshit. Due to the difference in strength and cultivation, the Master of Fate could only be trampled under his foot like a dead dog. He couldn't fight back at all. Enough! Suddenly, just as Yi Xian was ruthlessly trampling on the Master of Fate, a figure quietly appeared. This caused Yi Xian to look at this person gloomily. It was the heaven-devouring demon master who had been watching the battle. There's really someone who isn't afraid of death. Yi Xian's movements slowed down. The corner of his mouth curled into a sinister smile. He looked at the heaven-devouring demon master indifferently, and a trace of killing intent flashed across his eyes. Yi Xian, you've already won. Why do you have to humiliate him like this? The heaven-devouring demon master's demonic aura was dense, and his voice was strange and hoarse. Why? Do you want to stand up for trash like fate? Yi Xian sneered and glanced at the heaven-devouring demon master from the corner of his eyes. Yi Xian, I have to admit that I have indeed underestimated you. With your current cultivation, you have indeed surpassed us supreme experts. Even fate was defeated by you and suffered such a great humiliation. The heaven-devouring demon master said indifferently. He then smiled and said, but don't be too proud. After a Yuan Hui, you're not the only one who has become stronger. Chapter 1752. Rumble. Devouring the heavens and earth. The heavens and earth were as black as ink. The heaven-devouring demon lord was like a black hole vortex. It was as if he could devour the entire heavens and earth as long as he wanted to. Peak of the omnipotent realm. Yi Xian frowned slightly when he saw the heaven-devouring demon master's aura. In terms of cultivation, the heaven-devouring demon master was much stronger than the three omnipotent realm experts. He had reached the peak of the omnipotent realm and could be compared to the former master of human Tao. One step. Only one step. The heaven-devouring demon master was only one step away from attracting the forbidden tribulation. If he could successfully pass the tribulation, he would become the legendary forbidden character. But so what? The heaven-devouring demon master could not break away from the omnipotent realm. Even if he was already at the peak of the omnipotent realm, how could he be a match for Yi Xian? You're really arrogant, aren't you? Yi Xian smiled cruelly. He could feel that the heaven-devouring demon master was very confident, and even looked at him with eager eyes. Yi Xian, I actually don't want to kill you, but you're really annoying. If I don't kill you, you'll always cause trouble. The heaven-devouring demon master said coldly. Oh, Yi Xian said strangely. I'm standing right here. If you have the ability, I'll give you my life. Ha ha ha. Looking at Yi Xian's calm face, the heaven-devouring demon master laughed coldly. You're really arrogant. Do you think I'm destiny? Now that my cultivation has reached the peak of the omnipotent realm, I'm only one step away from the legendary forbidden realm. Forbidden? Yi Xian laughed, but it was a mocking laugh. He looked at the heaven-devouring demon master with disdain. Do you know what a forbidden is? Even the master of human Tao fell under the forbidden tribulation. How dare you dream of entering the forbidden realm? Yi Xian spoke in disdain. No one understood how terrifying the taboo tribulation was more than him. Back then, he accompanied the human Tao sovereign to undergo the tribulation together. Right now, although the heaven-devouring devil lord's cultivation base wasn't much weaker compared to the human Tao sovereign, his state of heart was far inferior. You're courting death. Rumble. The heaven-devouring demon lord swallowed the heavens and the earth. Demonic light surged as an extremely terrifying might burst forth from his body, pressing down on Yi Xian like the heavens and earth. Let me show you what I'm capable of. Boom. The heaven-devouring demon master had not made a move yet, but once he did, he displayed astonishing power. He drew a circle with his palm, forming a terrifying black hole, and sent it smashing towards Yi Xian. Woo woo woo. Demonic light howled in the sky, devouring the world. This strike was terrifying to the extreme. Even Yi Xian nodded in admiration. Compared to the past, the current heaven-devouring demon lord was indeed much stronger. However, to Yi Xian, the heaven-devouring demon master was still lacking. Scram! Roar! Yi Xian roared as he activated the omniscient dream. His entire body turned into nothingness as he released a terrifying demonic light. His entire body was as terrifying as a black hole. Pfft! Something extremely strange happened. The heaven-devouring demon master's strike landed on Yi Xian's body, but in the next moment, it turned into nothingness. It was as though this strike had been completely devoured by Yi Xian. You've been tricked. Suddenly, the heaven-devouring demon master laughed maniacally. He leaped forward with a cruel and vicious smile on his face. Both of his palms slammed towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian frowned. He had thought that the previous strike was a devouring technique, so he naturally did not take it seriously. However, when he received the strike from the heaven-devouring demon master, he was rooted to the ground. This strike was actually a forbidden technique. One breath. It was merely one breath. Yi Xian was actually rooted to the spot by this forbidden technique. However, it was also within this short period of time that the heaven-devouring demon master could do many things. Ha ha ha. The heaven-devouring demon master laughed maniacally. He slammed both of his palms onto Yi Xian's chest. Then, a demonic mist that could devour heaven and earth erupted from his body. He was actually devouring Yi Xian's cultivation in a frenzy. Yi Xian, you're really stupid. Of course, I know that you've surpassed the strongest. How can I be your match? However, don't forget that since I'm called the heaven-devouring demon master, I can naturally devour everything in this world. Give me your cultivation, and help me take the final step into the legendary Forbidden Realm. The heaven-devouring demon master laughed maniacally as a sinister and complacent expression bloomed on his face. It turned out that he knew from the beginning that he was no match for Yi Xian, so he had been pretending to be arrogant to make Yi Xian let down his guard. Only then could he cast a forbidden technique to trap Yi Xian for a breath of time and devour his cultivation. In fact, before the heaven-devouring demon master arrived, he already had a plan. He could also guess that Yi Xian's current cultivation had surpassed the strongest. After all, from the news of Yi Xian and Wan Hongling being suppressed, only Yi Xian had the ability to do so. Therefore, the heaven-devouring demon master had been waiting for the opportunity to attack. It was not to kill Yi Xian, but to devour all of Yi Xian's cultivation. After more than 700 million years, the heaven-devouring demon master had already cultivated the Tribulation Transcender technique to perfection. He had even fused the heaven-devouring demonic technique and the Tribulation Transcender technique into one, creating a brand new devouring technique. It was just that he had not taken this last step for a long time, and he could feel the terror of the taboo tribulation. In the end, he comprehended the key to taking the last step. Only by devouring the cultivation of the strongest of all time could he take that last step. And Yi Xian happened to be the person he had chosen. Moreover, he was confident that he could kill Yi Xian. Because of the fusion of the heaven-devouring demonic technique and the Tribulation Transcender technique, his devouring technique was unique. As long as he was given the right opportunity, Yi Xian would definitely be sucked dry by him. Now the opportunity had come. He pressed his palms on Yi Xian's body, and the peerless and terrifying devouring technique was operating. He could feel the terrifying power in Yi Xian's body, which simply made him tremble with excitement. Devour for me. Rumble. The heaven-devouring demon master roared excitedly. A strange black demonic mist bloomed all over his body, crazily pouring into his hands, and began to devour Yi Xian's cultivation. But in the next moment, the heaven-devouring demon master was stunned. Although he could feel the vast and infinite cultivation in Yi Xian's body, he couldn't devour it at all. You're really an idiot. You dare to have ideas about me with a mere devouring technique? Suddenly, Yi Xian's voice sounded. He looked at the heaven-devouring demon master indifferently, and a misty halo flowed around his body, making him look deep and terrifying to the extreme. Impossible. The heaven-devouring demon master was shocked and trembled as he roared. One had to know that he had fused with the Tribulation Transcender technique, and had already raised his devouring technique to a whole new level. He was confident that he could devour anyone's cultivation, but how could Yi Xian be fine? You want to devour my cultivation? You're still far from it. Today, I'll let you see what the eternal heaven-devouring technique is. Roar. Like an ancient beast roaring and devouring the universe, Yi Xian's entire body shone with an extremely terrifying black light, and an aura that could devour the world rippled out. Chapter 1753. Rumble. The devouring technique, which had never been seen before, blossomed from Yi Xian's body. The heaven-devouring demon master instantly suffered a great calamity. Ah! My cultivation! Something extremely terrifying happened. The heaven-devouring demon master screamed in horror. His body gradually shriveled up and the cultivation in his body surged towards Yi Xian. No matter how hard he tried to activate the heaven-devouring demonic technique, he couldn't resist Yi Xian's devouring technique. What kind of joke was this? Devouring Yi Xian's cultivation? This was the biggest joke in the world. The heaven-devouring demon master's plan was great. However, he would never have thought that Yi Xian had been immersed in the great dream of eternity for more than 700 million years. Not only did he improve his cultivation, but he also had various terrifying techniques. Great dream of eternity, reincarnation, turning into another person, and deducing various techniques. It was unknown how many people Yi Xian had transformed into in the great dream of eternity, and he had even deduced their various techniques. The heaven-devouring demon master was naturally one of them. Yi Xian had even deduced the devouring technique to an extremely terrifying level. How could the heaven-devouring demon master imagine it? Save me quickly! The heaven-devouring demon master was really anxious. His cultivation was rapidly depleting. If he allowed Yi Xian to continue devouring, he would really turn into a mummy. His blood, qi, and soul would be sucked dry by Yi Xian. Yi Dao, you stop! Boom! Suddenly a chaotic giant palm attacked. It was the Master of Chaos who had been watching the battle. He finally couldn't sit still anymore. Bang! Yi Xian frowned and turned his hand to face the attack of the Master of Chaos. It was also this attack that saved the heaven-devouring demon master's life and interrupted Yi Xian's devouring technique. Qi. In the next moment, the heaven-devouring demon master instantly retreated and pulled a safe distance away from Yi Xian. However, his entire body became thinner. More than 30% of his cultivation had been absorbed by Yi Xian. Hoo! The heaven-devouring demon master panted heavily in horror. He stared at Yi Xian in horror, a look of fear that had never been seen before in his eyes. A little, just a little more. If the Master of Primal Chaos hadn't saved him, he would have died at the hands of Yi Xian if Yi Xian had continued devouring him. Undone, do you want to die? Yi Xian's face was extremely cold. Extremely dense killing intent erupted from him as he stared at the Master of Chaos with an extremely cold gaze. Yi Daoyu, where it's possible to let people off, one should spare them. Why must you go on a killing spree? The Master of Primal Chaos asked coldly. Actually, it was not that the Master of Chaos wanted to save the heaven-devouring demon master, but he could not allow Yi Xian to continue devouring. If Yi Xian really succeeded in devouring the heaven-devouring demon master, wouldn't his cultivation level be even more terrifying? Yi Xian! Rumble! Suddenly, just when the atmosphere was tense to the extreme, an extremely resentful and furious roar resounded, and it was accompanied by a world-shaking murderous aura. Pfft! In the next moment, the Master of Fate soared into the sky. His entire body was a mess of flesh and blood. The only thing that remained was a pair of ferocious scarlet eyes. In this short period of time, the Master of Fate had finally broken free from Yi Xian's suppression. At this moment, a terrifying power of fate emanated from his body, accompanied by an extremely venomous killing intent. Fellow Taoists, if we don't kill Yi Xian, we won't be able to escape death. Today we must join forces to kill him. The heaven-devouring demon master roared maliciously. After experiencing the earlier scene, the heaven-devouring demon master knew that he was definitely no match for Yi Xian. Right now, the only way to kill Yi Xian was to gather all the utmost powerful beings together. Hundun, help me. The Master of Fate had long lost his human form. At this moment he was roaring out venomously. The only thing in his heart was killing intent towards Yi Xian. At the same time, he was asking for help from the Master of Chaos. Yi Xian, you've gone overboard. Today, your master has no choice but to let you down. Rumble. The face of the Master of Chaos was solemn. He had already made up his mind. Strolling over to the side of the Master of Fate, The three of them stood side by side as they looked at Yi Xian. Clearly, the three of them were prepared to join forces. After all, none of them would be a match for Yi Xian. Only by joining forces could they kill Yi Xian. Hui hui. Yi Xian laughed out. However, it was a cruel laugh. The way he looked at the three of them was even more venomous. With just the three of you, I'm afraid you guys are still lacking. Rumble. The 12 heavenly gates rotated horribly as the heaven burial reincarnation swept across the void. Yi Xian released a might that was as boundless as the heavens, causing the entire world to tremble. What are you guys waiting for? Are you waiting for him to kill us one by one? The Master of Fate roared at the other utmost beings. Clearly, he wanted to incite them to join forces to kill Yi Xian. Yi Xian and I have a deep friendship. Your Master of Fate will not help either of us. The Master of Time and Space took 3 steps back and made his stance clear. Your Master of Fate and Yi Xian have no grudges. Your Master of Fate does not wish to get involved in your grudges. The Master of all spirits retreated at the same time. Even though the Master of all spirits and Yi Xian had fought before, there was no grudge between the two of them. Therefore, there was no need for him to help anyone. Master of all spirits, remember your choice today. Don't regret it. The Master of Fate roared with hatred. However, there was nothing he could do. Destruction. The Master of Heaven devouring demon turned his head and looked at the Master of Destruction. After all, having one more utmost being would increase their chances of victory. At this moment, the Master of Destruction frowned as a look of hesitation flashed across his eyes. He then looked at Yi Xian and said, I just want to ask you one thing. Back then, was Yi Xiaoyu your incarnation? That's right. Yi Xian nodded his head slowly. There was nothing he couldn't admit to. This caused the Master of Destruction to have a complicated look on his face. He then let out a long sigh and retreated slowly. Destruction you? The Master of Heaven devouring demon was stunned speechless. He had not expected that even the Master of Destruction would choose to stand aside and watch. Undying, things have already come to this. Are you still not going to make a move? All of a sudden, the Master of Chaos looked over at the void. This caused everyone present to be startled. Shing. The void rippled as ripples spread out. A man wearing a ghost face mask appeared. His entire body was emanating a terrifying power of destruction. However, no one could make out his appearance clearly. Yi Xian shall die. Hoarse and deep. These were the short words of the ghost face man. He came before the Master of Chaos silently. This caused the Master of Fate and Heaven devouring demon to be invigorated. Undying Heaven Master? With the appearance of the ghost face man, Yi Xian looked at him calmly. In fact, he had long sensed the other party's existence. It was just that he had not exposed him. At this moment, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and sized up the Undying Heaven Master. He wanted to know if this person was the Undying Heaven Master of the past. It wasn't him. With just a glance, Yi Xian was able to determine that the grimace man in front of him wasn't the Undying Heaven Lord from back then. However, Yi Xian actually felt a sense of familiarity with this ghost face man. Although this feeling was very faint, Yi Xian did feel a sense of familiarity. Who is he? A question appeared in Yi Xian's mind. Yi Xian was very confident in his intuition. He definitely knew this person. However, at this moment, he was in the middle of a battle and did not have the time to think about this person's identity. However, this person had come together with the Master of Chaos and the others. He had even said that he wanted to kill him. Yi Xian naturally could not let this person go. Chapter 1754. The four most powerful beings had been there since ancient times. Among them were Hundan and Destiny. This was undoubtedly the most powerful battle below the Forbidden Realm. Even Yi Xian had to treat it seriously. You want to bully me with numbers? You must be dreaming. Boom! The Extreme Love Master stepped out and stood beside Yi Xian. At a time like this, she naturally couldn't let Yi Xian fight alone. Do you really think there's no one here? Yi Xuanma mocked coldly. He also stood beside Yi Xian. He naturally wouldn't let go of this opportunity to get on Yi Xian's good side. The four most powerful beings didn't find it strange that Yi Xuanma and the Extreme Love Master were fighting against Yi Xian. They had already expected this result. 3 against 4 seemed very different, but Yi Xian didn't need to fear the four most powerful beings. Now that Yi Xuanma and the Extreme Love Master had joined the battle, he was even more confident of victory. Yi Xian, do you really think you've won? The Destiny Master had already repaired his damaged body. He stared at Yi Xian with his red eyes and spoke coldly. Fengtian, are you still not coming out? Suddenly, the Master of Destiny let out a wild roar. His voice tore through the void and reverberated for hundreds of millions of kilometers. Yi Xian frowned slightly, but his expression didn't change much. However, Yi Xuanma beside him was shocked. His eyes flashed with fear. Rumble. Suddenly, 2 figures appeared from the horizon. It was Yi Fengtian and Wan Hongling. They were accompanied by 2 powerful beings. Hiss. As Yi Fengtian and Wan Hongling arrived, Yi Xuanma sucked in a breath of cold air. How could he have forgotten about these 2 hidden dangers? If these 2 joined the battle, it would be a 6 against 3 situation. This battle would be a life and death situation. Fengtian, you've come at the right time. As long as we eliminate Yi Xian today, the living beings of the 5 regions of chaos will be spared from the great calamity. He is the source of the dark turmoil and the beginning of the great calamity of eternity, the Master of Destiny said loudly. Even though Yi Xian had imprisoned Yi Fengtian and Wan Hongling in the supreme demonic heavenly palace, they were the strongest of all time. If they really wanted to leave, no one could stop them. Yi Fengtian and Wan Hongling were naturally paying attention to this battle. Yi Fengtian hesitated for a long time, but in the end, he still brought Wan Hongling out. Disciple greets master. Yi Fengtian was still respectful and courteous. When he arrived at the battlefield, he first bowed to Yi Xian. Wan Hongling didn't dare to slight Yi Xian as well. Junior brother, are you going to betray master? Yi Xuanma's eyes flickered. I don't dare. Yi Fengtian bowed to Yi Xian and said, Master, I have thought for a long time about what the Tao of life is. In the end, I have achieved great enlightenment. Oh. Yi Xian raised his eyebrows and said, What have you realized? People are born, grow old, get sick and die. Every living being has their own life from the moment they are born to the moment they die. Although I have comprehended the great Tao of life, I have taken a fork in the road and have been confused by fate. Over the past few days, I have finally come to my senses. Yi Fengtian knelt in the void. He respectfully kowtowed to Yi Xian 3 times. Wan Hongling also knelt down. She also looked guilty. Everything is from birth to death. Cultivators fight against the heavens. This is the Tao of life. At this moment, Yi Xian was blooming with light. It was a light of enlightenment. The knot in his heart was finally untied. Good. Yi Xian smiled and nodded his head in satisfaction. He didn't think that Yi Fengtian would understand so quickly. In fact, Yi Xian had always had high hopes for Yi Fengtian. After all, Yi Xian had inherited most of his skills. Yi Fengtian was able to walk his own path. This meant that Yi Xian didn't misjudge him. Most importantly, Yi Fengtian was simple and honest. He had never disobeyed Yi Xian. This was also why Yi Xian valued Yi Xian. Take Yi Xian and Yi Fengtian as an example. Yi Xian was cunning and could only be intimidated by high-handed means. When you were in power, he would wag his tail like a dog. When you were in power, he would definitely hit you when you were down. To put it bluntly, Yi Xian was a treacherous villain. Yi Fengtian was a gentleman. This was also the reason why Yi Xian had a different attitude towards the 2 of them. It was also one of his methods of controlling people. Although Yi Xian was despicable and treacherous, as long as Yi Xian was strong enough, he wouldn't dare to disobey him. Under Yi Xian's high-handed means, Yi Xian could only submit. On the other hand, Yi Fengtian was different. He had his own ideals and would rather die than submit. Therefore, Yi Xian's attitude towards the 2 of them was completely different. Yi Xian was already extremely proficient in controlling people. Previously, I and Hongling disobeyed you, master. Please forgive us. Yi Fengtian kowtowed to Yi Xian again. His eyes were filled with shame. Stand up. Yi Xian nodded slowly. Greetings, master's wife. Greetings, senior brother. Yi Fengtian and Wan Hongling stood up and bowed to the master of extreme love and Yi Xian. This made the master of extreme love smile happily. Senior brother, I was disrespectful before. Please forgive me, Yi Fengtian said. Ha ha ha, you and I are brothers. There's no need to say so much about a small misunderstanding. In the future, you and I should be filial to master together. Yi Xian was startled at first. Then he laughed and showed a friendly expression. However, this friendliness was a bit fake. On the surface, it looked like they were brothers who respected each other. Yi Fengtian, have you forgotten your mission? The Master of Fate's face was extremely cold. He never thought that Yi Fengtian would reconcile with Yi Xian. Destiny, you don't need to confuse me. I have thought about a lot of things these days. Your so-called path of life is just a reflection of the moon in the water. Back then, I received Master's inheritance and was able to cultivate quickly. The Calamity Transcender technique also helped a lot. I don't know how many people I devoured, but I also took their lives. Yi Fengtian said calmly. Yi Fengtian said indifferently. He looked at the Master of Fate with an extremely cold gaze. For a full 10,000 years, he'd been thinking about the Tao of life every day. After hearing what Yi Xian said to him, he'd already truly understood himself. What was life? Life was one's own, not someone else's. Everyone lived for their own life. Even Yi Xian was no exception. If he didn't kill and fight back then, and relied on the Calamity Transcender technique to devour the cultivation of others to strengthen himself, he wouldn't have become the strongest person he was today. Good. The relationship between master and disciple is indeed deep. The Master of Fate said coldly. He didn't expect Yi Fengtian to stand on Yi Xian's side. You want to kill our master? I'm afraid today will be the day you die. Wan Hongling stepped forward. The power of karma intertwined, and a terrifying aura bloomed. Fengtian is not talented, but I am willing to ask the four of you for advice. Yi Fengtian stepped forward. The power of life filled the sky. The terrifying cultivation of a Tao master of the current era erupted. His entire person seemed to be in harmony with the universe. Today, you won't be able to leave. Boom. Yi Xian smiled cruelly. Tongtian's extreme demonic power pierced the ground. The supreme demonic power rolled like a tide, accompanied by a sky-piercing evil aura. Chapter 1755. The three disciples were all extremely powerful. At this moment, they stood in front of Yi Xian. Such a terrifying formation made the Master of Destiny and the others pale. At this moment, the Master of Destiny and the others were shocked to discover that, at some point in time, Yi Xian already had the support of 4 of the 11 strongest experts. Needless to say, there was also the Master of Extreme Love, and the Master of Time and Space had a close relationship with Yi Xian. The most hateful thing was that the Destruction God and all spirits were neutral. How could the 4 of them fight against Yi Xian and the other 4? One Yi Xian was already terrifying enough, and there was also Yi Fengtian. The other 3 were not weak either. They were enough to completely crush the 4 strongest. At this moment, the sky-devouring demon lord's expression was uncertain. The Master of Chaos frowned deeply, and the Master of Destiny's expression was terrifyingly cold. The Master of Undying was wearing a ghost mask. His expression could not be seen, but his eyes were trembling slightly. Yi Daoyu, I don't want to be your enemy. I was forced to do this. I will take my leave now. Suddenly, the masked man slowly retreated and cupped his hands towards Yi Xian. He actually fled before the battle, turning into a black ray of light that flew into the distance. Cowardly rat. As the ghost masked man fled, the Master of Destiny cursed angrily. He was already at a disadvantage. Now that the ghost masked man had left, they were even less likely to be Yi Xian's match. Fortunately, the Master of Chaos and the sky-devouring demon lord did not flee, but their expressions were terrifyingly gloomy. Yi Xian. He frowned slightly and looked in the direction that the ghost masked man had disappeared. Obviously, he did not expect the other party to flee directly. It's him. Suddenly, Yi Xian's expression froze. A familiar face flashed through his mind, and it faintly matched the ghost-faced man that had left. Although the masked man was surrounded by the power of nirvanic extermination, that faint sense of familiarity was a technique that he had once cultivated. This allowed Yi Xian to more or less guess his identity. Interesting. To think that you've become an utmost powerful being, and even took over the position of the undying Heaven Lord. Seems like I've underestimated you. Yi Xian gave a strange smile. However, Yi Xian decided not to think about this devil-masked man for now. His priority now was to deal with these three supreme beings before him. Kill them. Suddenly, Yi Xian's face turned cold. He waved his hand and gave the order. The three disciples looked at each other, and then they exploded with terrifying might as they charged towards the Master of Destiny's group. You three juniors, you're courting death. The Master of Fate shouted out coldly. After all, they were all veteran supreme beings. The three disciples of Yi Xian were merely newcomers. Moreover, one mustn't forget that the Master of Fate and Primal Chaos were known as the number 1 and number 2 supreme beings. In addition, there was also the heaven-devouring demon lord, who was at the pinnacle of the pinnacle level. Why would the Master of Fate and Primal Chaos put the three disciples in their eyes? Rumble. In the ancient skies, the heavens collapsed and the earth cracked. Instantly, the three disciples clashed with the Master of Fate and the others. The 6 supreme beings released their boundless might as they fought in a stalemate. Yi Xian looked on indifferently. He did not join the battle because the three disciples were all supreme beings. This battle could be considered as a test of their own cultivation and fighting strength. Sir, let me go and help them, the Extreme Love Master said softly. All right. Yi Xian nodded. Boom. The Extreme Love Master stepped out, and the power of extreme love exploded through the universe. Now that the Extreme Love Master's cultivation base had increased tremendously, as she joined the battle between the supreme beings, the entire world exploded. Rumble. Billions of miles of mountains and rivers were pierced through. The stars in the universe were falling, and the water of the 9 heavens was pouring down. The apocalyptic scene continued to appear. The 7 supreme beings were in a chaotic battle. This was a battle that had never been seen before. Each of their attacks caused unimaginable damage to the 5 regions of chaos. However, as the battle became more and more intense, the 3 disciples and Yi Qingmei gradually fell into a disadvantage. Other than Yi Fengtian, who had attained the Tao, who could hold on for a bit, the other 3 were constantly being defeated. Strong. Really strong. The Master of Chaos was known as the number 1 supreme being of all time. His cultivation base was even above the Master of Fates. The sky-devouring demon master was at the pinnacle of supreme beings. Together with the Master of Fate, even the 3 disciples and the Extreme Love Master were not a match for them. Boom! This battle lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. Finally, the Master of Fate let out a roar. The 3 supreme beings joined forces and sent the 3 disciples and the Extreme Love Master flying. Yi Xian prepared to die. The Master of Fate charged towards Yi Xian in a frenzy. The Master of Chaos and the sky-devouring demon master followed closely behind. Their real target was Yi Xian, not the 3 disciples. Let's see how strong the 3 of you are. Rumble. 12 heavenly gates, eternal reincarnation. Yi Xian took a step forward. The great dream of eternity activated at the same time. His entire body exploded with an earth-shattering aura as he charged towards the 3 supreme beings. Boom! With a palm strike, the sky-devouring demon master was sent flying. His body was badly damaged. Bam! With the eternal reincarnation fist, the Master of Chaos was sent flying. He spat out a mouthful of blood as he crashed through many mountains. Die! Yi Xian's punch caused half of the Master of Fate's body to explode. His attack was too invincible. He had already surpassed the supreme beings. He did not put the 3 supreme beings in his eyes at all. Hiss! The expressions of the space-time lord and the others who were watching the battle from below slightly changed as they sucked in a breath of cold air. It was all because the current Yi Xian was terrifyingly powerful and had long since exceeded their understanding. The three disciples, and Yi Qingmei looked at each other in awe. The three of them did not join the battle, because Yi Xian was too strong. He could actually beat the three supreme beings without any resistance. Attack together. Kill him. The Master of Fate roared with hatred. He repaired his body once again, and roared at the Master of Chaos, and the sky-devouring Demon Master. The three of them raised their fighting strength to the peak, and joined forces to attack Yi Xian again. Trying to break a rock with an egg. Yi Xian laughed coldly. He had finally tested his true fighting strength. The so-called supreme beings were no match for him. He had also lost interest in this battle. Let's end this. Boom. Eternal reincarnation heavens, invincible since ancient times. Yi Xian took a step forward. The heavens and the earth exploded. The 12 heavenly gates erupted with an eternal reincarnation halo. The heaven and earth within millions of miles were distorted and shattered. Kill. Boom. Yi Xian punched through the sky-devouring demon master's chest. Large amounts of blood spurted out. The Master of Chaos was sent flying by Yi Xian's kick. His left arm had turned into a bloody mist. The Master of Fate was in an even worse state. He was torn into two by Yi Xian. The three supreme beings did not even have the strength to fight back. They all ended up in miserable states. Strong. Terrifyingly strong. So strong that there was no solution. At this moment, Yi Xian was too invincible. The three supreme beings were as weak as babies in front of him. Buzz! In the next moment, the three supreme beings activated their secret techniques and rapidly recovered from their injuries. However, their faces were pale. They had never looked so serious before. Their auras were extremely weak. They were no match for him. They did not even have the chance to fight back. The three supreme beings had to admit that they could only become lambs waiting to be slaughtered when facing Yi Xian. This was a battle on a completely different level. Chapter 1756. Fellow Taoists, please stop. Suddenly, the space-time master stood in front of Yi Xian and the three supreme beings. This caused Yi Xian to frown slightly. He was just about to unleash a ruthless attack to finish off the three supreme beings. However, since the space-time master had stepped in, Yi Xian still had to give him face. This also caused him to temporarily stop and see what the space-time master had to say. Yi Daoyu, today you have defeated all the supreme beings and can be said to be invincible in the chaos. Why don't you let them live? The space-time master said in a low voice. This? Yi Xian frowned. He did not want to agree to the space-time master's request, but the space-time master was pleading with him. He owed the space-time master a favor, so it would not be good if he did not agree. Since you are pleading for them, I will give you face. However, I have a condition. If chaos and fate hand over the heaven-shattering cauldron, I will let them live today, Yi Xian said in a low voice. As Yi Xian's words fell, the space-time master's expression changed slightly. Behind him, the Chaos Master and Fate Master's expressions were extremely gloomy. Yi Xian, you are very ambitious. So you want our heaven-shattering cauldron? All of a sudden, the Fate Master walked out slowly. At this moment, his face was calm and emotionless, but his eyes were terrifyingly cold as they stared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, do you really think you have one? The Fate Master said unfathomably. Fate, back off. The space-time master's expression changed, and he hurriedly advised Fate to stop. In fact, he had come out to mediate, because he did not want to see the Fate Master and Yi Xian fight to the death. One must know that Chaos and Fate Masters were known as the three strongest beings in the chaotic universe. Their true strength lay in their ability to control the three winding rivers. This was their true trump card. However, controlling the three winding rivers was extremely dangerous. If they made a mistake, there would be the danger of a backlash, especially in a battle of the same level. If the three rivers weren't properly controlled, half of the Chaosverse would be destroyed. That wasn't something the Space-Time Lord wanted to see. Space-Time, as you can see, it's not that I don't want to let them go, it's that they want to be my enemy. Don't blame me for not giving you face. Yi Xian laughed coldly. Yi Xian, I have to admit that you are indeed very strong. So strong that you can completely dominate me. The Master of Destiny pushed the Master of Spacetime away and slowly walked towards Yi Xian. The power of destiny pulsed around him, and a mysterious and profound aura slowly rose around him. The entire world began to darken. However, it's all over now. Today, I will personally kill you and let you know what true fate is. The Master of Fate spoke emotionlessly. The power of fate pulsing around his body sped up. The River of Fate. Yi Xian laughed. He had seen through the Master of Fate's trump card with a single sentence. There wasn't the slightest ripple of emotion on his face. He had long since anticipated this outcome. You will never know how terrifying the River of Fate is. You were able to force me to use my final trump card. You can be considered to have died a worthy death. The Master of Fate barked coldly. You want to use the River of Fate to kill me? I'm afraid you don't have the ability to do so. Yi Xian stood with his hands clasped behind his back, calmly looking at fate. Everything was going according to Yi Xian's plan. He had calculated everything. He wanted to properly experience the so-called River of Fate. He didn't appear to be afraid at all. At this moment, the strongest of all time posed no challenge to Yi Xian. Yi Xian set his sights even further. He wanted to see just how powerful the River of Fate was. Moreover, this wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was Yi Xian's conjecture about the River of Fate. The River of Time and Space walked out of the shadow of eternity. A taboo character walked out of the River of Chaos. If Yi Xian's conjecture wasn't wrong, perhaps there was also a taboo character hidden in the River of Fate. Rumble. The ancient times were in turmoil. Fate was surging. That mysterious aura was connected to the universe. The sound of surging waves could be heard continuously. Yi Xian, I will consign you to eternal damnation. Whoosh whoosh. The sky trembled and the world rumbled. The Master of Fate roared with hatred. His entire body was glowing. This was the light of fate. He was chanting a mysterious scripture in a hurry. He was frantically summoning the River of Fate. The rumbling sound of waves could be heard. The entire world began to distort slightly. A bright and clear river was faintly discernible in the sky. It traversed the entire sky. An unimaginable pressure appeared, causing one's heart to tremble violently. Rumble. Fate surged and large waves poured down. The eternal River of Fate finally appeared. The bright and pure river surged between heaven and earth. And even Yi Xian's expression became heavy. Terrifying. Too terrifying. Even though Yi Xian had opened the 12 heavenly gates, and his cultivation base and combat strength had long surpassed the strongest, the appearance of the River of Fate still made his heart tremble violently. The three rivers of eternity seemed to have existed since the beginning of the Chaos Verse, or even the Chaos Verse before that. Yi Xian had to admit that with his current cultivation base, he wouldn't be able to withstand a single blow from the River of Fate. He would be completely annihilated by the River of Fate. Yi Xian, your time of death has come. Go to hell. Rumble. At this moment, the Master of Fate was crazy and ferocious. He, who had summoned the River of Fate, was already extremely powerful. Because he could use the River of Fate to fight, he was confident that he could kill Yi Xian. Fate. The Master of Fate's 5 fingers slammed down on Yi Xian. The River of Fate that ran through heaven and earth surged with monstrous waves. A huge wave of fate poured down and suppressed Yi Xian. Let's see how capable you are. Yi Xian smiled arrogantly. Not only did he not retreat, but he also defied the heavens. The 12 heavenly gates rotated, and the Tongtian reincarnation halo bloomed on his body. Break for me. Yi Xian threw out a punch, and the eternal reincarnation suppressed the world. This punch directly shattered the huge wave of fate. The invincible fist light pierced through heaven and earth, and went straight for the Master of Fate. How is this possible? Such a terrifying scene shocked the Master of Fate so much that he roared furiously. This attack of his was an attack that had mobilized the River of Fate. How could Yi Xian shatter it with a single punch and kill him instead? The Master of Fate was not the only one who was panicking. The many utmost powerful beings who had been watching the battle were shocked as well. They could not believe their eyes. Even though they knew that Yi Xian was very, very strong, the River of Fate had existed since time immemorial. The power it contained was unimaginable. How could Yi Xian defend against it? No, not defend. He went against the flow and shattered the attack of fate with a single punch. As long as fate is not destroyed, my body is immortal. The master of fate roared furiously. The river of fate surged and poured down a shocking water screen that protected the master of fate. Boom! The world exploded as the water screen surged. Yi Xian's punch finally landed on the body of the master of fate. However, it was blocked by the water screen of fate. Chapter 1757. You still have a long way to go. Yi Xian grinned maliciously. The 12 heavenly gates rumbled and vibrated. The light of reincarnation surged into Yi Xian's body and extended from his arm to his fist, erupting with a terrifying destructive power. Bang! One punch. One punch of eternal reincarnation. This punch shattered the water curtain of fate and ruthlessly smashed into the master of fate's chest, sending him flying. Chi! The master of fate was sent flying thousands of miles away. Fortunately, Yi Xian's punch was blocked by the power of the river of fate, so it didn't have any effect on the master of fate. However, this also made the master of fate's hair stand on end. How could Yi Xian be so powerful to such a terrifying extent? Could it be that even the river of fate couldn't kill him? I don't believe it. The master of destiny flew over. His face was ferocious as he roared. His hands formed one mysterious spell after another, as he crazily activated the river of destiny to support himself. He wanted to completely annihilate Yi Xian here. Whoosh! Whoosh! The river of fate surged. Under the master of fate's frantic urging, the river of fate poured out hundreds of huge waves of fate and surrounded the master of fate. Go to hell! Rumble! The master of fate charged towards Yi Xian like a madman. At this moment, he had already urged the river of fate to its limit. He didn't believe that he couldn't kill Yi Xian in this battle. Bang! Yi Xian raised his fist and punched back. He directly fought with the master of fate. Bang! 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 The heavens collapsed and the earth cracked. Everything turned to dust. Yi Xian and the master of fate fought. Their figures intertwined as they attacked each other. It could be said that the heavens collapsed and the earth cracked. It had to be said that the master of fate's combat strength had indeed reached an extremely terrifying level after being strengthened by the river of fate. He was actually evenly matched with Yi Xian. Yi Xian, I want your life. The master of fate roared as he attacked Yi Xian with even greater ferocity. His fate arts were unleashed in a frenzy, and when combined with the power of the river of fate, it was truly terrifying to the extreme. Yi Xian also furiously fought back, leaving the master of fate helpless. No matter how much the master of fate wanted to kill Yi Xian, even with the support of the river of fate and the destruction of millions upon millions of miles, Yi Xian was still unharmed, not at all at a disadvantage. But what Fate King didn't know was that while he was madly attacking Yi Xian was also using terrifying methods to suppress him. The two of them seemed to be exchanging blows. But upon closer inspection, one would discover that Yi Xian seemed to be absent-minded, constantly observing the changes in the river of fate from the corner of his eye. At first, this situation didn't attract the attention of others, but as time passed, the first person to discover Yi Xian's abnormality was the master of fate. This was because the master of fate was madly attacking Yi Xian, wanting to use the river of fate to kill Yi Xian. However, he was unable to take down Yi Xian. When the master of destiny accidentally discovered that Yi Xian had been staring at the river of destiny the entire time, as if treating him as a puppet for training, this caused him to be both shocked and angry. His heart was filled with extreme shame and anger. The master of fate wasn't the only one who noticed this situation. The other supreme experts also noticed it, and their hearts trembled. Facing such terrifying attacks from the master of fate, Yi Xian actually had the mood to observe the river of fate. This simply overturned their understanding. Could it be that Yi Xian was so powerful that he didn't fear the river of fate's power? In fact, these people didn't know that it wasn't that Yi Xian didn't fear the river of fate's power. He could feel the terror of the river of fate more. It was just that the master of fate could only use a portion of the river of fate's power to strengthen himself. This didn't pose any threat to Yi Xian. If the Master of Fate could control the entire River of Fate, Yi Xian would turn around and leave without a word. Unfortunately, the Master of Fate didn't have this ability. He was already at his limit. Still not showing up? Boom, boom, boom. Yi Xian suppressed the Master of Fate while paying attention to the changes in the River of Fate. A huge doubt arose in his heart. Could it be that his deduction was wrong? Yi Xian, you dare to humiliate me? The Master of Fate was furious. At this moment, Yi Xian didn't treat him as an opponent at all. Even when he drew out the River of Fate, he still ignored him. It's really boring. Yi Xian was finally disappointed because the River of Fate didn't change at all. Only this trash, the Master of Fate, was talking endlessly. You can go die now. Yi Xian lost interest in this boring battle. His attention finally landed on the Master of Fate, and a murderous intent flashed across his eyes. Halberd, come. Wang. Yi Xian's glabella shone intensely. The heaven-destroying halberd rippled out, and turned into a 3-meter-long halberd that fell into his hands. Eternal Dream. Kill. Yi Xian struck out with his halberd. This halberd pierced through the heavens and the starry sky, and even destroyed reincarnation. It went straight for the Master of Fate's glabella, wanting to completely destroy his divine soul. Hiss. Faced with Yi Xian's all-destroying attack, the Master of Fate took a deep breath. He roared crazily and activated the River of Fate, summoning a curtain of water to block in front of him. He wanted to resist Yi Xian's attack. What a pity. He had overestimated himself. With Yi Xian's current 12 Heavenly Gates cultivation, even if he activated the River of Fate, he wouldn't be a match for Yi Xian. Boom. The heaven-destroying halberd shattered the curtain of water. Although the halberd's power had dissipated by more than half, it still went straight for the Master of Fate's glabella. I'll fight it out with you. The Master of Fate roared at the top of his lungs. He didn't care about the backlash from the River of Fate, and activated the River of Fate's power beyond his limits. Arg! The Master of Fate roared with hatred. Even if his soul was destroyed today, he had to drag Yi Xian down with him. Rumble! The shocking light curtain of fate appeared and blocked Yi Xian's fatal attack for the Master of Fate. Arg! In the next moment, the Master of Fate screamed in pain. This was because he had activated the River of Fate's power crazily. This power wasn't under his control at all, and it started to devour his body. I'll kill you. Even though he was being devoured by the River of Fate, the Master of Fate still roared with hatred. He wanted to kill Yi Xian in one fell swoop. Unfortunately, Yi Xian retreated with a loud bang and didn't look at the Master of Destiny again. The Master of Destiny struggled to move as he clutched his head in pain and screamed miserably. It was all because the power of the River of Destiny that he had attracted was currently crazily melting his flesh and blood. Why is it like this? The Master of Fate was badly mutilated. He knelt in the void and roared with hatred. The backlash was getting stronger and stronger. Gradually, it was getting out of his control. Unfortunately, Yi Xian ignored him like he was air. His eyes gradually turned serious as he looked at the River of Fate. Splash! 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 Waves of fate rose and fell. Finally, there was a slight change in the depths of the River of Fate. The pure River of Fate was surging slightly, and a faintly discernible figure was floating on the surface of the water. It really appeared. Yi Xian's eyes shone. His deduction was correct. There was a taboo character in the River of Fate. Chapter 1758. Thump, thump, thump. The River of Destiny was turbulent as waves of destiny surged out. The mysterious figure finally emerged from the surface of the water, but rays of death coiled around him. His eyes were emotionless and cold. His scarlet eyes were terrifying, and he was looking at everyone in the outside world through the River of Destiny. Everyone who met his gaze shuddered. However, when this forbidden figure's gaze met Yi Xian's, his scarlet eyes suddenly focused, and he couldn't move his gaze away for a long time. Rumble! Something terrifying happened. When Yi Xian met the forbidden figure's gaze, just the contact of their gazes caused monstrous waves to surge in the River of Destiny. Yi Xian! He narrowed his eyes and looked directly at this person. He didn't feel the slightest bit of fear. because this person was a forbidden figure. Instead, he was examining this person through the river of destiny. His entire body was covered in death energy and rays of death. Only his scarlet eyes were terrifying, and there wasn't the slightest bit of vitality around him. However, he faintly gave Yi Xian an extremely great sense of threat. Very strong. Terrifyingly strong. Even Yi Xian's heart was trembling slightly. At this moment, all of the utmost powerful beings exchanged glances with one another in horror. All of their eyes were filled with trepidation. That was because they could already sense that this person in the river of fate was an existence that could shock the entire world. Furthermore, he was the legendary taboo being. The world was deathly silent, and there was no sound at all. Only the sound of the surging river of destiny could be heard. Everyone breathed carefully, as if they were afraid of attracting the attention of this forbidden figure. Who dares to say that they're invincible? The eternal universe, the reincarnation of heaven and earth. I've finally awakened in this era. This mysterious forbidden figure's voice was hoarse and stiff like metal rubbing against each other. However, his voice was getting softer and softer, and it gave off an incomprehensible feeling. Rumble. In the next moment, something even more terrifying happened. This forbidden figure suddenly raised his head, and the rays of death around him shook the world. His scarlet eyes flickered intensely, and the river of destiny was actually flowing in reverse. The surging river water was flowing in reverse. Whoosh! After passing through the universe and shattering the universe, the waves of destiny surged out, and actually lifted his body towards the outside world. Retreat! The expressions of the supreme experts changed drastically as they retreated while trembling. This was because they could feel the fear of death. This taboo character who had walked out from the river of fate brought them a great terror that they had never experienced before. However, Yi Xian didn't move. He calmly stood in the sky and quietly watched this person walk out of the river of fate. Occasionally, a deep light would flash through his eyes. Rumble! This mysterious and taboo figure had finally walked out from the river of fate and truly appeared in the outside world. Go! What happened next was even more frightening. With a wave of his hand, the river of destiny actually strangely dissipated. After that, it transformed into an illusory river that gradually vanished from the world. Such a scene caused Yi Xian's expression to change slightly. However, he calmed down in the next moment and made some guesses in his heart. The faces of the other utmost powerful beings were grim, as they retreated billions of miles away. They looked at the world from afar, wondering what kind of horrifying thing would happen with the appearance of this terrifying forbidden character. You are? The forbidden character who had walked out from the river of fate sized up Yi Xian. His scarlet eyes were slightly puzzled, which then turned into astonishment, and finally into astonishment. In just an instant, various emotions appeared in his eyes. This proved that although he had just been born, his heart was very unsettled after seeing Yi Xian. He was even shocked. My name is Yi Xian. May I know who you are? Yi Xian said calmly. Yi Xian. The forbidden character shook his head slightly as his scarlet eyes dimmed. Then, he looked at Yi Xian again and said, Yi Xian is your name in this life. However, you haven't awakened the memories of your past life. No wonder you don't recognize me. But that's good too. If you awaken the memories of your past life, I might not dare to appear before you. The forbidden character who had walked out from the river of fate spoke in an unfathomable whisper. However, Yi Xian frowned when he heard it. This was not the first time Yi Xian had heard such words. Almost all the forbidden characters treated him as the reincarnation of someone. Although Yi Xian did not want to admit it, he knew clearly that he might really have a past life. After all, the dark figure who had walked out from the depths of his soul when he was undergoing the chaos punishment was proof. Who are you? Yi Xian asked the same question again. I've already forgotten my previous name and title. You can call me the Heartless Man, the forbidden character said in a hoarse voice. The Heartless Man? Yi Xian thought about it carefully and could not guess the meaning of this name. Dong dong dong. Suddenly, the Heartless Man moved. He walked towards Yi Xian step by step. The forbidden death light evaporated slightly as an unimaginable might pressed down on Yi Xian. I don't have much time left. Before the will of chaos descends, I will personally take your life. This way, I can avoid future calamities. Boom! The heartless man attacked without any warning. He was completely covered by the forbidden death light, making it impossible for others to see his appearance. However, his attack shattered the entire world. Rumble! A jade-like hand stretched out with a loud bang. Her slender fingers seemed to be carved from white jade, and they carried an unparalleled taboo might as they smashed towards Yi Xian to destroy him. Bang! 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 The world shook as all Dharma was destroyed. The heartless man's attack was terrifying to the extreme. Before it landed on Yi Xian, it had already shattered the world, revealing a vacuum world. You want to kill me? I'm afraid you don't have the ability. From the beginning to the end, Yi Xian had been on guard against the other party. When the other party attacked, Yi Xian was already prepared. Moreover, he also wanted to see how big the gap was between him, who had opened the 12 heavenly gates, and the so-called forbidden character. Buzz! The 12 heavenly gates rotated terrifyingly. 12 reincarnation halos poured down and blessed Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian was his true combat strength, and also his strongest state. He had not used his true strength in the battle with the strongest of all time. Kill! Boom! Eternal reincarnation. The fist light shook the world. Yi Xian's fist smashed towards the heartless man. The eternal samsara fist light shook the heavens and the earth as it emitted an unparalleled might. Bang! When the fist and palm collided, all things collapsed. After an earth-shattering explosion, Yi Xian and the taboo figure both retreated. However, the power that erupted from their attacks directly spread out in all directions, causing an extremely terrifying calamity. Fight! Yi Xian roared towards the sky. His eyes were terrifyingly cold. There was even a trace of red in them, as the flames of war burned in his eyes. The attack just now finally gave Yi Xian the confidence to be invincible. This was because he was not unable to fight back. Even if he was facing a forbidden character, he still had the strength to fight back. Chapter 1759. Kill! Boom! The 12 heavenly gates moved along with Yi Xian. The heaven-destroying halberd was held in Yi Xian's hand. The eternal dream was activated, and the eternal reincarnation fist was unleashed. 12 heavenly gates. Reincarnation fist? Heaven-destroying halberd? Facing Yi Xian's attack, the eyes of the heartless who called himself a taboo character moved slightly. The forbidden death ray rumbled, and a pair of slender jade-like hands reached out. Yi Xian was not afraid at all. He had opened the 12 heavenly gates, and his cultivation had long surpassed the omnipotent. Even if he was not as strong as a taboo character, he was in an invincible position. Slash! Yi Xian slashed out with his halberd. It was as if he wanted to split the entire world apart. The sky was sliced into two by him, revealing a terrifying crack that covered the sky. Break! The heartless scarlet eyes flickered violently. The forbidden death ray around him became stronger and stronger. A pair of slender jade-like hands slammed towards Yi Xian's halberd. Bang! There was a shocking explosion and the sky shattered. The two of them collided again. However, this time, Yi Xian was sent flying. On the other hand, the heartless did not move. It was obvious that he had the upper hand in this attack. One had to admit that taboo characters were indeed terrifying, especially this person who had walked out of the river of destiny. His cultivation was definitely not below the eternal shadow. Again, Yi Xian was blasted flying, but he didn't suffer any injuries. His entire body returned once more, and an ancient, profound, and mysterious aura appeared around him. Eternal dream. Rumble. Yi Xian's figure changed terrifyingly. Mysterious smoke rose from his body, making him look inexplicably illusory. His entire body released an aura that made one's heart tremble. The heartless cried out in surprise. However, his entire body was covered by the death ray. It was impossible to see his face and expression. However, this cry of surprise clearly proved that he was shocked by Yi Xian's technique. Attack! Rumble! In the next moment, Yi Xian had already rushed forward. A terrifying death ray rose from his body. The 12 heavenly gates turned as black as ink. It was as if he had turned into a taboo at this moment. How is this possible? How do you know the attack technique of that old man's 8 taboo techniques? The heartless man spoke in surprise as his entire body retreated. However, his jade-like hands were flying in the air as he shot out thick rays of forbidden death light in an attempt to suppress Yi Xian. Attack. As soon as the attack character technique was activated, Yi Xian's combat strength increased at a terrifying rate. Moreover, at this moment, not only was he using the attack character technique, but he was also using the profundities of the Calamity Transcender transformation. Boom, boom, halberd sky, reincarnation burying world. At this moment, Yi Xian was too unfathomable and terrifying. Every time he slashed out with his halberd, it would cause a shocking death aura. He was actually able to use forbidden power, which simply shocked the heartless man. Not to mention the taboo characters fighting Yi Xian at this moment. Even the many supreme experts watching the battle hundreds of millions of miles away gasped at this moment. They all guessed in horror. Could it be that Yi Xian had already stepped into the legendary taboo realm? What a taboo secret technique. It can actually deduce the taboo death ray. However, a fake is still a fake. You have only opened the 12 heavenly gates. Even with this taboo secret technique, you are still no match for me. How shrewd was the heartless man. He was a taboo character who had lived for countless years. He could tell at a glance that Yi Xian's forbidden death ray was only activated by a shocking taboo secret technique. However, what surprised the heartless man was that Yi Xian was currently using the attack formula. This was the offensive technique of the old man's 8 taboo techniques. How did Yi Xian learn it? No one knew that old man better than him. This old man had existed for much longer than him, especially his 8 taboo techniques. Each of them could be considered a taboo technique. Moreover, when the 8 techniques were combined, it could evolve into an earth-shattering taboo technique. Although this technique was not as powerful as a taboo heavenly technique, it still surpassed ordinary taboo secret techniques. It could be said to be that old man's trump card. Boom! Yi Xian struck out with his halberd. Under the activation of the eternal dream, this halberd was filled with the forbidden death ray, as if it could annihilate everything in the world. It's just the attack formula. It's just one of the 8 taboo techniques. If you had learned all of the 8 taboo techniques, you might still have a chance to hurt me. However, you are still far from it. The heartless man shouted coldly. His jade-like hand reached out from the death ray again. He directly drew a mysterious symbol in the void and suppressed Yi Xian. Bang! This symbol was surrounded by darkness and was filled with a terrifying death ray. It actually sent Yi Xian flying. Rumble! Eternal dream. Unparalleled physical body. 12 heavenly gates as black as ink. Yi Xian's flying figure suddenly stopped and then turned back. 8 taboo techniques? Yi Xian smiled strangely. His aura became deeper and more terrifying. The aura of the eternal dream kept flowing on his body. Illusion. Rumble. Heaven and earth changed. 10,000 techniques appeared. In the next moment, an extremely terrifying thing happened. Countless Yi Xians appeared within hundreds of millions of miles of heaven and earth. They densely covered the sky and covered the earth. It was impossible to tell how many Yi Xians there were, nor which one was his real body. 8 taboo techniques, illusion formula. The heartless man held his breath. He did not expect Yi Xian to know a second secret technique. 8 taboo techniques, chaos formula. Rumble. Heaven and earth turned dark. Heaven and earth were no longer heaven, and earth were no longer earth. 10,000 techniques fell silent, and the void distorted. Bang! 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 The stars shifted positions and hung upside down in the sky. Stars fell, and then floated in the sky. They lit up one by one, forming an indescribable taboo death array. 8 taboo techniques, formation formula. Qi. Qi. The slaughter of heaven and earth, annihilating all living things. Streaks of black light condensed from nothingness and turned into streaks of shocking dark sword light. They hung upside down in the sky and released peerless killing intent that could penetrate through the ages. 8 taboo techniques, kill formula. Unparalleled throughout eternity, monstrous and terrifying. When Yi Xian consecutively used the 8 taboo techniques, The heartless man's scarlet eyes were trembling in fear. He could not believe his eyes. In addition to the attack formula from before, Yi Xian had already used 5 of the 8 taboo techniques. This was simply unbelievable. One had to know that that old fellow regarded the 8 taboo techniques as his life. Even if he imparted one technique to Yi Xian, it was already cutting off his flesh. Imparting 2 techniques was already the limit. How could he impart more than half of the 8 taboo techniques? The heartless man did not know that apart from these 5 techniques, Yi Xian still had the inverse formula. Otherwise, this taboo figure would definitely be shocked. Myriad beast slaughter. Suddenly, without waiting for the heartless man to recover from his shock, Yi Xian used another great technique, shocking the heartless man so much that his eyes twitched violently. Roar! A terrifying beast shadow appeared in the sky and let out a ferocious roar. This was the ancestor of all beasts' unique forbidden technique. At this moment, Yi Xian had also used it. You are indeed capable. At this moment, the heartless man finally began to take Yi Xian seriously. He had already understood that although Yi Xian was not a taboo technique, his methods were simply shocking. In fact, the heartless man did not know that the technique Yi Xian used was not something he had learned. The truly terrifying thing was his eternal dream. That's right, it was the eternal dream. As mentioned before, Yi Xian had reincarnated countless times in the eternal dream. He had transformed into countless people, and had even deduced the techniques of these people. He naturally did not let off a taboo figure. Of the so-called 8 taboo techniques, Yi Xian only knew the inverse formula and the attack formula. He had not imparted the other 6 techniques to him at all. However, in the eternal dream, Yi Xian had transformed into the eternal shadow and deduced the other 8 taboo techniques on his own. Of course, Yi Xian had only deduced 4 techniques. This was already his limit. He was still unable to deduce the complete 8 taboo techniques. However, this was already very terrifying. It was enough to prove the power of the eternal dream. Although it was not as good as the taboo heavenly techniques, it had surpassed the taboo great technique. This was also why Yi Xian was confident that he could fight a taboo figure and remain undefeated. He was relying on the eternal dream. Chapter 1760. 1,000 overlapping shadows, 10,000 overlapping bodies. How strange was the Forbidden 8 techniques. Illusion? Under Yi Xian's activation of the Great Dream of Eternity, his figure filled the entire world, as if there were tens of thousands of him. Fight! The 8 forbidden techniques were unleashed, and the 5 techniques of illusory formation, chaotic killing technique were unleashed at the same time. There were even beast shadows that blotted out the sky and roared in the sky. The 12 heavenly gates rotated terrifyingly, and the destructive attacks were directed at the heartless man. You do have some ability. Facing Yi Xian's boundless technique, the heartless man coldly spoke. His jade-like hands flew in the air, and even the heavens and earth were collapsing in a terrifying manner. Rumble! Countless Yi Xian were attacking the heartless man, and the forbidden array was pouring down with magical light. There was also the shocking sword light from the kill character that was sweeping over, but they were all blocked by this forbidden figure. Without entering the forbidden realm, you are still far from it. Rumble! The heartless man's jade-like hands covered the sky. It was unknown what technique he used, but he actually shot out terrifying forbidden death rays that constantly destroyed Yi Xian's various great techniques. Bang! 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 The world was in chaos as the sky collapsed. Yi Xian's figure appeared, the heaven-punishing halberd in his hand, piercing through the starry sky. The eternal dream was activated to the extreme, transforming into a forbidden power that fought the heartless man crazily. Boom! The heartless man's jade-like hands slapped the heaven-punishing halberd, sending Yi Xian and his halberd flying. However, Yi Xian instantly turned back and pierced the heartless man's forehead with his halberd. Chaotic Sky 7 Slaughter Halberd. Chi! Yi Xian roared ferociously as the halberd pierced through the chaos. He had been preparing for this attack for a long time, and it could be considered a true killing move. He stabbed it at the heartless man's forehead. Rumble! The world darkened as the Chaotic Sky 7 Slaughter Halberd and the heaven-punishing halberd displayed unparalleled ferocity. The black light on the halberd's tip made the heartless man feel suffocated. Wheel of fate. Rumble. Something shocking and strange happened. The heartless man formed a seal with his hands, and a wisp of forbidden death light surged in his hands. A dark rune condensed, and it actually circulated with an extremely strange power of destiny. Bang! The heartless man threw out a dark rune, which collided with the heaven-destroying halberd in an instant. A blinding light burst out, and the world was instantly shattered. Rumble! This power was too terrifying. It directly swept through hundreds of millions of miles of heaven and earth. Even the stars in the chaotic starry sky fell one after another, causing a great calamity to the 5 regions of chaos. Retreat! The expressions of the various supreme beings, who were watching the battle from afar, changed drastically. This was because the power that the two of them had unleashed was far too frightening. Even if it was just the aftershocks, it was extremely likely that they would be severely injured. Chi. The various utmost powerful beings once again distanced themselves from the battlefield. As for the Master of Fate, he had already awoken from the backlash. It was all thanks to the appearance of the heartless man that the river of fate had dissipated. Otherwise, the Master of Fate would have died from the backlash of the river of fate. Damn it! Looking at the battle between Yi Xian and the mysterious forbidden figure, the Master of Fate glared hatefully at Yi Xian. His eyes were filled with fear and indignation. At this moment, the difference between him and Yi Xian was too great. The two of them were not on the same level at all. Wanting to kill Yi Xian was simply wishful thinking. Leave. Without any hesitation or delay, the Master of Fate turned into a beam of light and shot off into the distance. He actually left this battlefield and fled into the distance. Yi Xian naturally noticed the Master of Fate's escape, but he did not have the time to stop him. This was because the heartless man was attacking him. Moreover, the great technique that he used was extremely terrifying. The cycle of the heavens, the birth and death of all things. The heartless man was channeling some kind of great forbidden technique. His jade-like hands flew up, and the heavens collapsed and the earth collapsed. The terrifying forbidden power wreaked havoc in the vast sky, turning into streaks of black light that shot towards Yi Xian. Kill! Yi Xian crazily roared. The heaven-punishing halberd slashed through the vast sky, and the great dream of eternity, combined with all kinds of great forbidden techniques, was unleashed. He shattered the countless streaks of black light, and once again clashed with the heartless man. Bang! 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 They fought from the sky to the ground, from the ground to the sky, until the two of them fled into the vast starry sky. All kinds of great forbidden techniques and destructive attacks were constantly unleashed. Stars exploded, and the sea of stars evaporated. One great star after another fell to the ground, and from time to time, blood would sprinkle from the starry sky, accompanied by angry roars. Boom! Suddenly, there was an earth-shaking explosion, and the two of them appeared in the sky once more. But this time, neither of them made a move. They stared at each other from afar, killing intent emanating from them. Blood! Blood! A stream of blood flowed from the corner of Yi Xian's mouth. His face was somewhat pale, and the 12 heavenly gates behind him seemed somewhat dim. Clearly, Yi Xian had been injured in this crazy battle with this forbidden character. On the other hand, the heartless man was still shrouded in the forbidden light, and the power around him had not weakened at all. From this, one could see that this forbidden character was too terrifying. Even though Yi Xian had opened the 12 heavenly gates, he was clearly no match for him. You're not bad. To be able to fight me to this extent is enough for you to be proud. Unfortunately, everything ends here. It's time for this farce to come to an end. Rumble! The next moment, the heartless man stretched out his arms, and a black light rose behind him like a blazing black sun. It was an extremely strange heavenly gate. The Immortal Heavenly Gate? Yi Xian looked on in horror. No. This was the Immortal Heavenly Gate, formed by the combination of the 12 heavenly gates. Yi Xian suddenly came to his senses, and saw the crux of the matter at a glance. Moreover, when the heartless man took out this heavenly gate of darkness, his aura grew at a terrifying rate. A feeling of palpitations grew in Yi Xian's heart, accompanied by a great terror of life and death. Strong, very strong, so strong that it made Yi Xian's heart palpitate, and a deep sense of helplessness grew in his heart. Just in terms of cultivation, he was no match for this person. The 12 heavenly gates have existed since ancient times. This is a primal chaos taboo. You haven't even combined the 12 heavenly gates, so how can you fight me? The heartless man spoke coldly. What was even more terrifying was that the heavenly gate of darkness was gradually fusing with him. This part of the world turned into boundless darkness, accompanied by an aura of death that covered the sky and earth. Kacha. Streaks of black lightning streaked across the world, and the terrifying black lightning flickered. When the heavenly gate of darkness completely fused with the heartless man, he suddenly erupted with an unimaginably terrifying might. Just his aura alone made Yi Xian's breathing become heavy. This is the Forbidden Realm, Yi Xian muttered solemnly. Clearly, the heartless man was a forbidden character. He had already cultivated the 12 heavenly gates, and combined the heavenly gates. He had even broken through this realm, and transformed into a forbidden character. However, Yi Xian felt that something was wrong. If he also combined the 12 heavenly gates and cultivated the immortal realm to perfection, could it be that his next realm was also a forbidden one? Chapter 1761. No. There must be something wrong. Yi Xian had a feeling that although the taboo figure also cultivated the 12 heavenly gates, it was definitely different from his. However, Yi Xian couldn't pinpoint the exact difference. This left him extremely puzzled. Cadaveric aura. Suddenly, a ray of light suddenly flashed through Yi Xian's mind. He stared fixedly at the heartless man. Only then did he realize something that he'd overlooked. It was the cadaveric aura that surrounded the taboo figure. The taboo figure in front of him, who had walked out of the river of destiny, didn't have any aura of a living person. His entire body was filled with cadaveric aura. It wasn't just him. Shadow of eternity. There was also the taboo figure, who had walked out of the river of chaos. There was also the ancestor of all beasts. Their bodies were filled with cadaveric aura. There was no sign of life at all. And this was the biggest difference between him and them. As for the taboo power Yi Xian had just conjured, it was only powered by the great dream of eternity. There was still a huge difference in essence. Do you feel it? This is the power of a taboo. This game should end. I'll send you on your way. Rumble. The heartless man strolled across the sky. At this moment he revealed his true cultivation level. It was also the cultivation level of a taboo figure. You've taken a wrong path. Suddenly, Yi Xian's eyes were deep as he suddenly said this. However, it was also Yi Xian's words that made the heartless man's figure stop. The cadaveric aura that surrounded him trembled in terror. What nonsense are you talking about? The heartless man shouted coldly. He pretended to be calm, but his trembling body had already betrayed his heart. You're not a living person at all. You're just a dead person. No, you can also be called a living dead. It's not just you. The other taboo figures are the same. They are just living dead like you. Your cultivation has all taken a wrong path. Am I right? Yi Xian boldly deduced. You sure have a lot of nonsense. However, you will still die today. I definitely won't wait for the day you awaken in the future. Rumble. Clearly, the heartless man did not want to answer Yi Xian's question. He raised his hand, and forbidden death rays that filled the sky surged out, turning into a terrifying forbidden killing technique that was about to crush Yi Xian. You can't kill me. Boom. Yi Xian was not afraid at all. The 12 heavenly gates were impenetrable as they rotated behind him. Those streaks of reincarnation halos were Yi Xian's strongest trump card. He was not afraid of the opponent's forbidden death ray at all. Kill. The heartless man clearly trembled, but he still resolutely attacked. This attack directly shattered the eternal sky, and it carried with it an earth-shattering forbidden might as it smashed towards Yi Xian. Retreat! Yi Xian wasn't stupid enough to take the attack head-on. With the protection of the 12 heavenly gates, he retreated frantically in order to avoid the opponent's forbidden killing technique. Rumble! Everything within 1 trillion kilometers was reduced to dust. The stars in the sky dimmed. This attack could be considered a world-destroying technique, but Yi Xian still managed to dodge it. However, a stream of blood flowed out from the corner of Yi Xian's mouth. Let's see how long you can last. The heartless man had clearly lost his patience. He condensed another forbidden technique. But this time, before he could do anything, something extremely terrifying happened. Rumble! The eternal universe's heavenly might was unfathomable. A face that blotted out the sky appeared, and a pair of emotionless eyes opened slightly in the firmament. The will of the chaos verse had descended. Boom! A layer of scarlet clouds unfurled as scarlet bolts of lightning leapt about in the clouds. Just the appearance of the cloud was enough to make the world explode, in a terrifying manner. The destructive power was enough to shatter the souls of people. Crack! Suddenly, a crimson lightning bolt leaped out of the clouds, transforming into a shocking bolt of lightning that struck the heartless man arg. The scarlet blood lightning struck the heartless man's body, ignoring the forbidden death ray on his body, and causing him to be bathed in blood. Black smoke continuously evaporated from his body, accompanied by his miserable cries of pain. His miserable screams were worse than death. Just the heartless man's miserable screams alone were enough to make Yi Xian's scalp tingle. Clearly, the mysterious lightning bolt had caused this forbidden figure to suffer an unimaginable calamity. Damn it! The heartless man roared hatefully. He looked up at the face in the firmament and the crimson lightning clouds, his eyes filled with deep indignation and fear. However, he could only look helpless. Consider yourself lucky today. Don't fall into my hands. Rumble! The heartless man glared hatefully at Yi Xian. He formed a seal with both hands to condense a forbidden technique, seemingly suppressing his cultivation once more. His aura became extremely faint, and then he transformed into a black beam that fled into the cosmos. Clearly, the descent of the will of the chaos made him not dare to stay any longer. He needed to find a place where he could hide from the will of the chaos. Only then could he avoid this calamity. You want to leave? It won't be that easy. Yi Xian sneered. He wouldn't let go of such a good opportunity. As the saying went, beat a drowning dog. There was no way he'd let this person go. Why Yi Xian took a step forward and fled into the cosmos as well. He chased after the heartless man with great speed. Master? Sir? The extreme love master and the others, who were billions of miles away, cried out in alarm. However, Yi Xian had already vanished into the cosmos, and it was too late for them to stop him. What did it mean to beat a drowning dog? What did it mean to hit a drowning dog? At this moment, Yi Xian fully understood the meaning of these two phrases. The forbidden figure, who'd walked out of the river of destiny, was frantically fleeing through the cosmos. The crimson lightning clouds chased after him, occasionally striking him with terrifying bolts of lightning. Miserable! Miserable! It was unknown what kind of power this thundercloud had, but it completely ignored the death ray on the forbidden figure. Every strike caused blood to splatter everywhere, accompanied by the heartless man's mournful roars. Originally, he should have hidden himself as soon as he'd walked out of the river of destiny. He shouldn't have unleashed his forbidden power to kill Yi Xian. Now, not only had he failed to kill Yi Xian, but he'd also attracted the descent of the chaotic will, which had given him a terrifying death tribulation. If the crimson lightning clouds continued to pursue him, he'd be severely injured even if he didn't die. Moreover, Yi Xian was hitting a drowning dog. He was frantically chasing after this forbidden figure, constantly striking him with all kinds of forbidden techniques. Coupled with the tribulation from the crimson lightning clouds, it could be said that he'd forced this forbidden figure into a dead end. You're despicable! The forbidden figure who'd walked out of the river of destiny roared furiously, frantically fleeing into the depths of the cosmos. He wanted nothing more than to grind Yi Xian's bones to dust. Let's see where you can run to. Yi Xian laughed sinisterly. He didn't care how the other party cursed him, because this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Chapter 1762. Crimson Blood Tribulation Cloud. Escape through the starry skies. The taboo character who had walked out of the river of destiny was facing a great tribulation, accompanied by Yi Xian's frantic pursuit. It could be said that he was extremely aggrieved the moment he was born. He did not care about Yi Xian. What he was truly afraid of was the tribulation cloud that was chasing him. This tribulation targeted the taboo death power on his body, making it impossible for him to resist. Crack! A blood tear as thick as a water bucket struck his body, causing the taboo character to groan as the death light around him began to shatter. Boom! Yi Xian hit him while he was down. It could be said that he was beating a drowning dog. He unleashed all sorts of vicious techniques, forcing the taboo character to defend himself in a sorry state. Flee! The taboo character, who had walked out of the river of destiny, fled frantically. His speed was so fast that it could move heaven and earth. It was unknown how many stars and waves turned into ashes behind him. PCHHD. Yi Xian pursued him frantically, having no intention of letting him go. After all, such a good opportunity was too rare. If he could suppress this taboo character, he would definitely be able to obtain a lot of useful information. Time passed, and the starry skies were in turmoil. As Yi Xian continued to pursue the taboo character, the two gradually entered the depths of the chaotic universe. The surrounding stars were almost gone, and the various laws were gradually reduced. What surprised Yi Xian the most was that the tribulation cloud formed by the chaotic will was gradually fading. It was only when the taboo character fled into a desolate and withered planet that the tribulation cloud finally dissipated. Yi Xian's figure came to a halt as he looked at the withered planet in front of him. His brows were slightly knitted together. To pursue or not to pursue? At this moment, the tribulation cloud had dissipated without a trace. This taboo character had fled into this planet. It would be very difficult for him to suppress him with his current cultivation. Pursue! In just an instant, Yi Xian made a decision. If he missed this opportunity, he would have to wait until he broke through to the next realm before he could suppress the taboo character. Boom! Yi Xian took a step forward and turned into a beam of light that entered the withered planet, disappearing into the starry skies. The sky was vast, the ground was vast, and it was a stretch of desolation. As far as the eye could see, there wasn't even the slightest bit of vitality. This place was filled with withering and deathly stillness, and not even a single green leaf could be seen. Only endless scorched earth filled this place, and it was even more so filled with desolation. This was the scene that appeared in front of Yi Xian, which made Yi Xian frown slightly. If this was just a desolate and lifeless planet, Yi Xian wouldn't be surprised. What truly surprised him was that the laws of this planet didn't exist, the spiritual energy wasn't present, and even the primal chaos of the heavens didn't appear. The last days. Suddenly, Yi Xian's entire body shook. These words flashed through his mind. This place could really be called the last days. After arriving here, Yi Xian suddenly recalled some matters from his youth. The mortal dimension that he'd once resided in was the so-called last days grounds. There was no way to cultivate, no spirit chi, no laws, and even the primal chaos heavenly mysteries could not appear. At this moment, Yi Xian wasn't even able to absorb a shred of spirit chi from the outside world, let alone cultivate here. Fortunately, Yi Xian's cultivation was sufficiently formidable, so this last day's grounds didn't affect him at all. In the next moment, Yi Xian's brows eased up, and then a wisp of a strange grin curled up on the corners of his mouth. He was transforming the future. He was entirely capable of transforming the future in this last day's grounds. Yi Xian finally understood why the heartless man had fled here. The chaotic will wasn't here in the last day's grounds, so it was naturally unable to send down calamities to target him. However, this just happened to be beneficial to Yi Xian, and it allowed him to transform the future in this last day's grounds. Are you going to get the fuck out here yourself? Or do I have to drag you out myself? Yi Xian stood proudly in midair as he swept the heavens and the earth around him, and his voice reverberated through the last day's grounds. Unfortunately, this taboo that had walked out from the river of destiny didn't give Yi Xian any response at all, and it was like he'd vanished into thin air. Let me see where you can hide. Yi Xian laughed gloomily as he raised his palms and ceaselessly tossed out numerous terrifying balls of light towards the last day's grounds, and it instantly caused a scene of obliteration to appear. Yi Xian was very sure that this taboo would absolutely not be able to leave this place. He was already heavily injured, so if he left this last day's grounds, then it was very likely that the chaotic would descend once more. As expected, as Yi Xian attacked ruthlessly, a ray of death shot into the sky, and then the heartless man appeared once more before Yi Xian. However, when Yi Xian saw this person clearly, he was clearly stunned. A woman. This taboo that had walked out from the River of Destiny is actually a woman. And she's even a world-shocking and peerlessly gorgeous woman? She had skin of ice and bones of jade, a picturesque appearance, and a pair of eyes that flickered like stars. Even if her expression was icy cold and carried rage, it was unable to conceal her world-shocking beauty. However, this taboo woman's skin was slightly too fair, and it gave others the feeling that only the dead could possess such a complexion. Moreover, it was even to the extent that the death energy around her was extremely weak, and this was the reason why she was able to reveal her true appearance. Don't go too far. The heartless man shouted explosively in a cold voice, while her beautiful eyes flickered with terrifying killing intent as she gazed at Yi Xian. However, her eyes were filled with helplessness as well. If she didn't suffer the calamity from before, then she wouldn't take Yi Xian seriously at all. However, she'd suffered a heavy injury now. Even if she was a taboo, her cultivation had fallen to rock bottom, so she would definitely suffer a huge loss if she fought Yi Xian again. So you're a woman. You've truly surprised me. Yi Xian gradually recovered his calm. He gazed indifferently at the taboo woman before him, while a wisp of a deep expression flashed through his eyes. Even if my cultivation has been greatly damaged, you can't do anything to me. I advise you to leave right now and stop pestering me. The heartless man spoke coldly. I can't do anything to you? Yi Xian smiled. He was indeed unable to make up his mind earlier. But now that he knew this was the last day's grounds, he was filled with confidence. Rumble! He transformed into the future. In the next moment, Yi Xian directly executed this technique. The phantom of the future appeared out of thin air, and it even instantly fused into Yi Xian's body. An extremely terrifying aura erupted from within him, and it directly pressed down upon the heartless man, and even forced her to retreat step by step. You? The heartless man's expression changed drastically, and her expression was solemn to the extreme, because at this moment, Yi Xian was even stronger than an absolute expert, and it actually caused her heart to tremble with fear. An incomplete taboo heaven technique? How discerning was the heartless man? She'd lived for too long, so with a single glance, she could tell that the technique Yi Xian executed was too extraordinary. At least you have some discerning eyes. Do you think I can kill you now? Thump, thump, thump. Yi Xian strolled through the sky as he walked step by step towards the heartless man. With every step he took, the entire last day's lands trembled terrifyingly, and it seemed as if it would collapse at any moment. Wait! What exactly do you want before you leave? The heartless man compromised. In the end, she didn't want to fight with the current Yi Xian, because it wouldn't benefit her at all. Chapter 1763. Yi Xian laughed coldly. I'll ask you a question and you'll answer. Then we'll write off our differences. If your answer displeases me, then this last days will be your burial ground. A threat. A blatant threat. The heartless had a gloomy look on her face. Her beautiful face was filled with rage, but all she could do was nod hatefully. She was no match for Yi Xian right now. A wise man submits to circumstances. This saying didn't just apply to everyone. It was even more applicable to taboo figures, because they were still considered humans. Tell me, what is a taboo? Who are you? Who are the taboo figures who emerged from the primordial chaos and the rivers of time? What do they have to do with you? How many taboo figures have yet to be born? Yi Xian sat in the lotus position in midair, inviting the heartless to sit down and talk. He had a kind smile on his face, as though he hadn't been the one who had been shouting about killing. You ask too many questions, but I'll tell you everything I know, the heartless said coldly. Thank you. Yi Xian smiled, his eyes abnormally deep. He had been waiting for a very, very long time. Perhaps today would be the day that the veil covering this so-called taboo figure would be unveiled. Perhaps you've already guessed it. I'm not a creature of this chaos verse, but a survivor of the previous chaos verse. The Heartless said in a low voice. The Heartless spoke in a low voice, gradually uncovering a piece of dusty history for Yi Xian. This caused Yi Xian's spirits to rise as he listened attentively. Chaos verse, 12 periods. These words were known to all living beings. They represented that the chaos verse was divided into 12 periods, but in truth, they were just a drop in the ocean. The Heartless was a creature of the previous chaos verse, and her other identity shocked Yi Xian even more. Still, Yi Xian had expected this. She was the master of destiny of the previous chaos verse. That's right. She was the master of destiny of the previous chaos verse, which was why she had been able to emerge from the river of destiny. Chaos verse 12 periods. When the 12th eon ended, the chaotic universe would be destroyed and reincarnated. All living beings would be reduced to nothingness until a new chaotic universe opened. This was also known as the chaotic reincarnation. According to legend, only by opening the door to the depths of the primal chaos could one truly transcend. Only by not entering the cycle of reincarnation would one be able to exist eternally in the primal chaos, or even surpass the chaos verse. If you are the Lord of Destiny of the previous chaos verse, then the two forbidden figures who emerged from the river of chaos and the river of time are the Lord of Chaos and the Lord of Space-Time of the previous chaos verse? When the Heartless man said this, Yi Xian boldly deduced, "You're both right and wrong." The Heartless man shook his head slowly. Yi Xian could not understand his words. These two old fellows are indeed the Lord of Chaos and the Lord of Space-Time, but they aren't from the same era as I am. They are survivors of an even more ancient chaos verse. As for Chaos and Space-Time, who were in the same era as me, they had long been destroyed in body and soul by the chaos samsara, said the Heartless man solemnly. What? An even more ancient chaos verse? Yi Xian was shocked to hear this, and his face instantly turned grim. He had guessed that these three might be the three supreme experts of the previous chaos verse, but he hadn't expected there to be such a huge difference between them. The three of them weren't from the same era. The other two were actually survivors of an even more ancient chaos verse. Are you very surprised? The Heartless man let out a self-deprecating laugh, then murmured, "Do you know that the chaos verse experienced countless cycles of reincarnation from its birth to its destruction? Do you know how many supreme experts died tragically in the chaos samsara? Everyone wants to transcend, but in the entire chaos verse, how many people can truly transcend? In the previous chaos verse, the era in which I achieved my Tao, I witnessed the destruction of the chaos verse with my very own eyes. Out of 12 autarchs, I was the only one who managed to survive. I hid within the river of destiny, but in the end, I ended up as a walking corpse." When the Heartless man reached this point, she paused for a moment, then looked at Yi Xian. "Didn't you want to know what a taboo is? Today I'll tell you. A taboo is a fork in the road, a road you've been forced to take. Everyone knows of the 9 heavenly gates, but this is an incomplete path to begin with. The true path should be the 12 heavenly gates. In the previous chaos verse, I was only able to open the 9 heavenly gates. It wasn't until the chaos verse was destroyed that I finally comprehended the 12 heavenly gates. But by then it was already too late. My entire body was destroyed by the chaos verse, and I was transformed into a dead person. However, my true soul remained behind. I rebuilt my fleshly body, destroyed my own cultivation, and then trained in the 12 heavenly gates. But in the end, I was nothing more than a dead person. Even though I trained in the 12 heavenly gates and broke through to the next level, I was still walking a fork in the road. That's how I became the taboo figure you speak of." The Heartless man spoke a great deal, and she even explained the origins of the taboo figures to Yi Xian. This left Yi Xian utterly stunned. No matter how peerlessly talented you are, when you reach the end of the chaos verse, if you don't push open the great gate, you'll be nothing more than a speck of dust. There are as many dazzlingly talented people in the eternal universe as there are carps in the river. None of them wish to die, but one chaos verse after another passes. How many of them actually survive? The heartless man sighed heavily. In other words, the people who walked out of the rivers of time and the primordial chaos are the survivors of an even more ancient chaos verse? Yi Xian asked. That's right. The heartless man slowly nodded. When I transformed myself into a taboo figure, I could sense their existence, and they could sense my existence. In addition, those two old fellows were once the lords of space-time and the primordial chaos. They've lived through countless chaos verses, and so they know far more than I do. A chaos verse is a so-called era. Every time a chaos verse is destroyed and reincarnated, it'd be a miracle for even a single person to survive. There are far too many chaos verses where no living beings are able to survive, the heartless man said solemnly. Why would a chaos verse be destroyed and reincarnated? What's the point of this? Yi Xian asked the question that puzzled him. Heh. The heartless man let out a desolate laugh. All things are born to nourish man, but man has nothing to repay the heavens with. Every single living being is plundering the resources of the chaos verse. They constantly train to become stronger and stronger, to the point where they are on par with the chaos verse itself. We are like parasites that live within the chaos verse. We are a threat to the chaos verse itself. Thus, every 12 yuans, the chaos verse will undergo a cycle of destruction and reincarnation, destroying all existences that threaten it in order to nourish itself. Then a new chaos verse will be created. This is what the chaos verse is called. After hearing the heartless man's explanation, Yi Xian was unable to come back to his senses for a very long time. This was because he had learned far too many shocking secrets today. Fellow Taoist, there's one more thing I'd like to ask you about. Yi Xian hesitated for 3 breaths of time, then finally said these words. I've told you everything I need to tell you. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask, the heartless man said. Are there taboos above taboos? What sort of existences are they? Yi Xian said solemnly. Chapter 1764. Above the taboo. When Yi Xian mentioned these 4 words, the heartless man's body clearly trembled. His eyes scrutinized Yi Xian in horror. This was because in his heart, Yi Xian was an existence above the taboo of the taboo. Yi Xian could clearly sense that the other party's emotions were fluctuating greatly. Even the way he looked at him was somewhat flustered. Aren't you the taboo of the taboo? You know this question best, so why do you need to ask me? After a long while, the heartless man spoke in a heavy tone with a hint of a sigh. I'm just me. Even if I was the taboo of the taboo in my previous life, I'm just myself in this life. I don't know much about the distant and unknown past, Yi Xian said solemnly. That's right. You're indeed not him yet. You're still not that legendary existence. The heartless man nodded slowly, agreeing with Yi Xian's words. Phew. The heartless man slowly took a deep breath, as if he was relaxing himself and preparing to answer Yi Xian's question. Yi Xian waited patiently, because he knew that the heartless man would definitely tell him, whether it was because of the current situation, or what would happen in the future. Finally, the heartless man spoke. The so-called taboo of the taboo is the greatest legend of the eternal universe. They are also the small group of people who are the most shocking, the heartless man said with reverence. I've told you before that taboo figures like us have walked down a fork in the road. We're just living dead. However, this small group of people who are at the level of shocking are living people. They rely on their own strength to resist the eternal universe. And even the eternal universe can't destroy them. The heartless man muttered to himself, his voice trembling slightly. Do you know what the primordial era is? The heartless man looked at Yi Xian and asked. The primordial era? Yi Xian muttered in confusion. Clearly, this was the first time he had heard these words, and didn't know what they meant. Looking at Yi Xian's confused expression, the heartless man stopped keeping Yi Xian in suspense, and began to tell Yi Xian about a distant and unknown past. Long, long ago. It was so long ago that it couldn't be measured in 100 million years, nor could it be measured in a single chaos verse. It had to be traced back to the very beginning of the chaos verse. This period of time was known as the Primordial Era. It was also the beginning of the Chaos Verse. In this distant and unknown period of time, it was unknown how many heroes rose to startle the heavens. In this era, the 3,000 great Daos were varied and varied. The so-called supreme experts were as numerous as carps crossing the river. It was far from the current situation. Only one supreme expert could be born in every Yuan Hui. That was the most dazzling era. It was also the peak era. It was known as the strongest era in the eternal universe. In that era, countless heaven-shaking geniuses rose up. They traversed the eternal universe. And even the will of the universe was nothing in their eyes. Someone had once reached the pinnacle of the universe and slashed open the eternal starry sky with a single sword. He wanted to destroy the will of the universe with a single sword and obtain great freedom and transcendence. There were also people who laughed proudly in the 9 heavens and the universe. They wanted to dominate the eternal universe and fight the will of the universe. There was also a peerlessly beautiful woman who ascended the path to the heavens. She sang the eternal flying reincarnation song and wanted to reshape the eternal universe. In that distant and unknown primordial era, hundreds of flowers bloomed and tens of thousands of families contended. It could be said that it was an era where everyone was like a dragon. Shocking geniuses rose up one after another. Living beings who didn't obey the will of the Chaos Verse roared. Even if it was the Chaos Verse, they swore to destroy it. But there was a saying that was very good. The peak of prosperity was the decline. The primordial era finally came to an end. The will of the Chaos Verse also sent down the eternal calamity. Shocking living beings died tragically in the eternal calamity. In that battle, the primordial era was destroyed. In that battle, all living things were destroyed. In that battle, the 3,000 great Daos were destroyed. In the end, everyone died. The Chaos Verse also ceased to exist. Even the will of the Chaos Verse, which was high and mighty, dissipated because of this battle. And this battle was also known as the Battle of the Dusk of the Gods. This was because these living beings were the true gods. Only they could be crowned with the title of gods. The Battle of the Gods had come to an end. The primordial era ceased to exist. The living beings were gone. However, one person had survived. This person was the most powerful person of the primordial era. He was the taboo of taboos, a legendary existence of the eternal era. No one knew who he was. No one knew what he looked like. No one knew his name. And this dust-covered history was also information passed down through some scattered law fragments. However, there was a legend that couldn't be verified. According to the legend, this person who had survived the primordial era had personally pushed open the Great Gate and entered it. From that day onwards, this legendary person had never appeared from the Great Gate again. Some said that he had transcended and was no longer suppressed by the Chaos Verse. Others said that he had died within the Great Gate because an extremely terrifying living being was hidden within it. No one knew the answer, nor did anyone know what this most powerful expert of the primordial era had experienced within the Great Gate. The primordial era had come to an end. Countless years had passed. This period of time was so long that it couldn't be measured in the time of an entire Chaos Verse. Finally, one day, the Chaos Verse was open once more. A large number of living beings appeared within the Chaos Verse, and then they rapidly developed and multiplied. As these living beings grew stronger with each passing day, a powerful and prosperous era began once more. This era was known as the Primordial Era, or the Primordial Universe. The living beings of the Primordial Universe were extremely powerful. They gradually understood the events of the Primordial Era, and countless living beings sought ways to transcend themselves. Although the Primordial Era couldn't compare to the Primordial Era, it wasn't much inferior. Many shocking geniuses appeared, and the process of development was extremely similar to that of the primordial era. Until one day, the most mysterious Great Gate in the entire Chaos Verse appeared. A person actually walked out of the Great Gate, carrying 12 simple and unadorned cauldrons in his hands. There was also a halberd revolving around him. When this person appeared, he instantly caused an uproar amongst the living beings of the primordial era. They all came to the conclusion that this man was the most powerful expert of the primordial era, the only person to have entered the Great Gate. However, this man left in desolation. No one knew where he went. The only things left behind were the 12 cauldrons and the halberd. The 12 cauldrons and the halberd all belonged to the most powerful expert of the primordial era. Some living beings came to the conclusion that this man had most likely brought these things out of the Great Gate. Others came to the conclusion that these 12 cauldrons and the halberd were the most precious treasures of the most powerful expert of the primordial era. An unimaginable slaughter was about to take place. In order to obtain the 12 cauldrons and the halberd, the living beings of the primordial era fought madly, all for the sake of obtaining these precious treasures. Chapter 1765. In the end, the 12 cauldrons and the halberd were all taken away, and they truly disappeared from the sight of all living beings. From then on, a legend was born in the primordial age. If anyone could uncover the secrets of the 12 cauldrons, they might be able to obtain the method to transcend, truly push open the door, and even surpass the eternal universe. Time flew by, and the primordial age rushed by. The primordial age grew stronger and stronger, almost comparable to the primordial age. Finally, the primordial age arrived, and the world began to be destroyed once again. Countless primordial age beings defied the heavens, and they all joined this earth-shattering war. No one knew how long this war lasted, and the concept of time was lost. Finally, everyone was dead, killed by the Aeon tribulation. However, there were still some people who had survived in the primeval age, and not even the Chaos Verse had been able to wipe them out. No one knew who the 3 people who survived were, but they also disappeared, and no one knew where they went. Time flew by in a hurry. Finally, the primordial age opened up once again, and a large number of living beings began to appear. A magnificent and powerful era began once again. This era was called the primordial age, and countless primordial age beings cultivated themselves. They also obtained the law fragments passed down from the primordial age and the primordial age, and understood that painful period of history. In the primordial age, there were very few battles, and all the primordial age beings cultivated diligently. Even if the primordial age's spirit chi was inferior to the primordial age and the primordial age, their diligence made up for it. This was because the primordial age beings knew that if they wanted to survive, they had to break the eternal universe's destruction. Only by breaking the eternal universe's enslavement could they obtain great transcendence and great freedom. Finally, the primordial age came to an end, and the war of the heavens began once again. There were great sects who set up the primordial age array, and hundreds of millions of disciples went against the heavens. There was also a demonic sect, and hundreds of millions of disciples self-destructed, turning into an ancient sea of blood that swept through the heavens. There was also a person who could be said to be invincible among the godly kings, who fought the heavens with thousands of descendants. There were shocking people in every era, and the primordial age was no exception. This war of the heavens could be said to be fought to the end of the primordial age, because this war gathered the blood and sweat of the primordial age beings, and they had endured for countless years for this war. In the end, after the end of the Antiquity era, all the living beings of the Antiquity era died. Only 4 people survived. The same thing happened again. These 4 creatures also disappeared without a trace, and no one ever saw them again. The Desolate Age, the Archaic Age, and the Ancient Age. These 3 eras were known as the 3 strongest eras. It was unknown how many heaven-shaking creatures had defied the heavens and rose to power during these 3 eras. Perhaps chaos had sensed it, or perhaps the world had changed. When the primordial era was destroyed, the eternal universe underwent an earth-shaking change. The heaven and earth spiritual chi was thin, and the 3,000 great Taos did not exist. Even the power of laws was weak, and all living beings born were extremely weak. Even the strongest of them would not surpass the strongest of all time. This era was known as the Chaos Verse. Each Chaos Verse was divided into 12 periods, and each period was divided into 1. 2,853 billion years. Each chaos verse could only produce 12 autarchs, who would replace the chaos verse and rule over all living things. It was also when the chaos verse appeared, and the 12 elements began, that the three great rivers came into being. It was also from this moment onwards that the 12 heavenly gates of eternity were annihilated without a trace. All living things only knew of the 9 heavenly gates of eternity. Even the autarchs of eternity thought so. Time was the most heartless, and chaos was the most tyrannical. One chaos verse after another began the cycle of reincarnation. Every 12 periods, the chaos verse would undergo a cycle of reincarnation. Since Yi Xian's era, the chaos verse had undergone countless cycles of reincarnation. This number was impossible to calculate, but it was extremely long. It was so long that Yi Xian could not imagine it, much less deduce it. Each cycle of samsara meant that all living beings in the chaos verse would die. It was a catastrophe, a nightmare for all living beings. Since the desolate age, archaic age, and the ancient age, no one else had ever appeared, much less fought against the chaos verse. They could only die unwillingly in the great calamity. However, there were no absolutes in the world. Although no one had ever appeared, there were always stunning figures who appeared in the waves of time. They weren't willing to be destroyed, so they took a different path. During the great calamity, they used all sorts of secret arts and paid the price of their own lives to escape the cycle of reincarnation. These people were the so-called taboo figures. Unfortunately, even though they had comprehended the 12 heavenly gates after their deaths, they had already walked down a fork in the road. There was no turning back, because they were nothing more than dead people. The so-called taboo of taboo, the small group of people who could shock the heavens and the earth, were the experts who had survived those 3 eras. They were living people who dared to stand shoulder to shoulder with the chaos verse, and even fight against it. Even the great calamity of eternity couldn't do anything to them. Do you understand now? The heartless man's body trembled visibly, and he was unable to calm his emotions for a very long time. Even a taboo figure like him knew how small and insignificant he was in this ancient period of time. The taboo of taboo figures was a legend among legends. The taboo of taboo figures were the true powerhouses of the eternal universe. Not even the will of the universe could destroy them. At this moment, Yi Xian was trembling. He was trembling soundlessly when the heartless man revealed this ancient period of history to him. Even though Yi Xian's mental fortitude could be described as indomitable, his heart still trembled when he heard this oral history. What was he now? He was as insignificant as dust, as insignificant as an ant. Compared to those heaven-defying experts, he really was just an ant. Just the heartless man's words alone left Yi Xian feeling indescribable emotions. That was the era that belonged to me. That was the era when the myriad Daos fought for supremacy. I hate it. I hate that I was born in this era. If I had been born in the primordial era, I would have been able to compete with those heaven-defying experts. I would have even fought alongside them to conquer the heavens. Yi Xian roared in grief and indignation. His eyes were as red as fire, and he yearned for that distant era. If he had been born in that era, he was certain that he would have been able to settle his grudges as he pleased. He definitely wouldn't have been limited to the current environment. Unfortunately, that distant and unknown era no longer existed. This was an ironclad fact that left Yi Xian feeling indescribably sorrowful. If time and space could be reversed, if the primal chaos could be reversed, I would have wanted to go to those 3 great eras to take a look and see the peerless heroism of those heaven-defying experts. The primordial era. The primordial era. The primordial era. Yi Xian roared in grief in his heart. This pain came from his heart. He hated that he wasn't born in that era. This was also the greatest regret in his life. You open the 12 heavenly gates. You're a living person. You're walking the old path of those heaven-defying experts. This is also why I believe that you're a taboo among taboo. It's not just me. I'm sure the other taboo are the same. Because in our era, it's impossible for a living person to open the 12 heavenly gates. The heartless man stared quietly at Yi Xian. There was an indescribable complexity in his eyes. Thank you for telling me. Yi Xian stood up and bowed to the heartless man. Today, The heartless man had revealed a part of history that had been covered in dust for him. It also allowed him to understand too many shocking ancient secrets. Yi Xian bowed willingly. You don't have to thank me. Even if I didn't tell you today, you'll know in the future, the heartless man said calmly. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.